Okay, let me turn off the Red Sox game.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Are they winning?
No, they're losing 6-0.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to open the Carver Conservation Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. We have a number of items on our agenda under discussions in business that we will move to the end of tonight's meeting. The discussion on the culvert at Cranbrook Restaurant has been pushed forward to our next meeting, November 3rd. The discussion of potential uses of 44 Lakeview Street will occur after everything else tonight. Use of Wetlands Protection Fund for the Open Space and Recreation Plan survey will go afterwards. We will get to Pine Gate Renewables after we hear the one new hearing that's on the agenda for tonight. The continued hearings have been continued again till November 17th, so in deference to the party that is doing the new hearing tonight, and kind of figuring that the Pine Gate Renewables conversation may last a little while, I want to get the new hearing done and out of the way so that that party doesn't have to stay if they don't want to. All right, so can I have a motion to change the agenda?
So moved.
Second? All right, it's been moved and seconded to change the order of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Approved 5-0. So, first off is the new hearing, 5 Johns Pond Road, NOI DEP SE 126-630. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, MGL Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Carver Wetlands Protection Bylaw, that a public hearing will be held at 7:00 p.m. on Wednesday, October 20th, 2021, Meeting Room 1 at the Carver Town Hall to hear the notice of intent submitted on behalf of Tony Lombardo for after-the-fact repair construction of a retaining wall with stairs and a patio and the disposal of trees, stumps, and brush. The proposed work was conducted within the 65 and 100-foot buffer zone 2 and on the bank associated with Johns Pond. A variance from the Carver Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Section 9.2.1.3/3, is required for the activities within the 65-foot buffer protected under the bylaw. The project is located at 5 Johns Pond Road, Carver, Massachusetts, map 12, lot 4-4. All interested parties are invited to attend.
Did you sign in?
Yeah, please sign in.
Do that now.
Four. Five. And then Kevin.
I vote yes.
Everyone set? How are you tonight?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Good, thanks.
You packed the audience.
I
Yeah,
know. All right, yeah. It's quite the show.
never knew this many people were interested
All for you.
in.
All of this is for you.
Yeah.
Red
We're outta
Sox
here.
game wasn't doing good, so they came here instead. I guess.
I never knew all these people lived on Johns Pond. All right, so you're here regarding a patio and a cement retaining wall, correct?
Yes.
Do you want to just describe the history of
Yeah.
of it, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as we've kind of said before, when we moved into the house 3 years ago, as far as that patio, retaining wall, stairs, it was kind of falling apart at the time. Or it wasn't kind of, it was falling apart at the time. The railroad ties were kind of coming apart, decomposing, whatever. So it was kind of treacherous, and the retaining wall itself was kind of broken down. So we decided, and like we know now, we didn't know we had to come before you to repair what was there, but we decided to put something better there, and we did. We changed to a stone wall. We kept the same footprint There was some digging that had to be done, but we kept the same footprint, the staircase the same angle of the staircase, and then up top where the patio was, we just did instead of the pavers that was there, it's a stamped concrete patio. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything? I think that's about the whole thing. We did pass in some pictures that show, we didn't have a ton because it wasn't the prettiest thing to take pictures of, but we did find some that showed,
The beach.
and you can get a reference of where the beach is
Stairs.
compared to the wall and the stairs, and gives you a better grasp on the before. If I had known better, I would have had better pictures, but
All right, do you have those pictures? with
We
you?
gave them to Brooke.
Oh, Brooke's got 'em? Okay.
Weeks ago, yeah.
Are these historic pictures going back?
Before
Before.
everything was done.
yeah,
We have
yeah,
it dated.
yeah. The dates are on
timestamps,
those
yeah.
ones. Yeah.
So from 2018, 17.
That's a couple of them that was from the other department. There's one, there's a locus, shows where the wall is.
Yeah, there's a good top-down one that you can totally
You've
see
all
the
been out there.
curvature.
You've all been,
Anyway, so you know,
you can see the stairs, the old wooden stairs.
yeah. I think those were 2008 or something, weren't they?
That would make the most
What were they,
Was it?
17? I don't.
Oh, so I can't.
They were
oh,
No,
before
18,
anything
yeah.
was done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere, I think the Google Earth one's like
Yeah, the
old,
Google Earth
probably.
one's like
Yeah,
that.
but you can see the patio and the curvatures.
So what's the NOI, just as for this work after the fact?
Yeah. No.
Sit on the naked.
When was the Wood Elm?
No, yeah, 5 o'clock.
Maybe we have to get them tired before.
Oh, okay.
Are they gonna get them?
This photo here, that's the past. It says on the bottom, it says 1 Andrews Point Road.
Oh, you know what that is? Sorry, I should have explained better. I just happened to be out on our boat on Sampson's Pond, and we just saw a setup that looked exactly like ours there, and I thought, geez, that's not a bad thing to bring in because it just shows a very similar situation like we had.
Is that Bob Andrews' place?
Yeah. Well,
We had one in and then there was also one on John's Pond that has a stone retaining wall too. I think it's 7, 8, 9.
9, yeah.
yeah, I saw that as well.
Yeah, just for reference.
All that does is ask us to investigate those two as well.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And as far as the one on Sampson's Pond, I believe that's been there for a long time.
Yeah, it might have been, yeah.
Yeah,
It just struck me when we were driving by it.
No, I get that. I just want to wait for the rest of the...
Sorry, we should have brought
I
in
know,
some extra copies.
That's okay. We'll take it. Do you have anything you'd like to say? You've seen the pictures.
And you've all been out there?
We've all been out there.
The backyard looks great. The issue doesn't come into how nice it looks and how much you needed to have done. The issue comes into the repair work it did, and now it's an after the fact. And we're trying to get away from that.
Yeah.
But that being said, they didn't enlarge it, they didn't modify it, they didn't make it, they didn't put something in where it wasn't before. So I don't personally have a big issue with, other than the fact that shame on you for not coming in and asking. I don't have a big issue with it. There was no redesign. This is not like a similar project that we're dealing with right now that had nothing anywhere and suddenly, poof, everything just appeared. This was,
And that one had plans that didn't show them.
that's correct. So this is, you know, I just, this goes back to my usual stance of, this is a taxpayer resident, and I don't think any of this was done with, to hell with the town, we'll just do it and then beg forgiveness after the fact. I honestly don't think you knew.
No, yeah, we thought, we should have checked, we just thought it was a repair, and, yeah.
Because you've come before this board with stuff you were doing at your business.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And, you know, with things that you knew you had to ask questions of, and you were very, very amicable to all of that. So I really don't think that you did any of this in the dark of the night, and let's not tell anybody till somebody, you know, squealed on you, and now it's, oh, what do I do now? So I don't have a big issue with modifying the variance for this.
Do you have any pictures with you of the current wall?
I don't know if there's,
I don't think so.
I don't think there's any, yeah.
But even when we did the site visit, it didn't look like that wall was brand new. It looked like it had been there a little bit, and in fact, I think Peg even remarked that the stairs looked like they were existing.
But the concrete wall, the interlocking bricks, the curb
Yeah.
wall was new.
But the wall was curved. If you look at that top-down view on Google Earth, you can see the previous wall, and the same exact curvature, the
Yeah.
same stair thing. It's exactly the same footprint.
Jim, do you have any
No.
comments?
No comment.
Mr. Badger?
Yeah, you know, to Mr. Jermaine's point, I mean, nothing malicious was done, and we get that. I guess, you know, one of the things that is very different is how with the new materials and how they're constructed plays a very different role in how that area drains, and you know, there was underbrush and things like that all in there that was cleared out, that you can see from the older photos as to what was there, and that none of that's there now. That's all stripped out, and there's a big stone patio where that was. So,
Yeah, but the big stone
but again,
patio's way up there.
we're talking about after the fact, so I'm at a loss as to not to sound like a negative person here, but I'm not really sure what we can do or not do anyway. So.
Well, this very board agreed to not have them go back in, and it would do more damage to clean up what was over by the chicken coop.
Right.
Than to just let that stuff grow back, take the big stuff out, and you know.
Yep.
Which it has. It looks so natural now. It's all greenery.
That's
full.
my point. I think
Yeah.
I think they've done everything we've asked them to do, and I honestly think that, you know, it was like, oops.
Yeah, no, and
You know?
I'm not, and I don't know that I'm directly even speaking to you. This is sort of, this is one of those things where information is sort of like medicine out to the public. It takes a little while to build up in the bloodstream before it actually works, you know. So, you know, I'm hoping that cases like this, when they come up, start becoming fewer and fewer as people aren't shocked and surprised that there are bylaws that have standards, and that there are things like notice of intent required before work is done. So this is a very, in my mind, in my thinking, in my view, a very minor thing here. Procedurally, as you know, we've been dealing with other cases end up being absolute monsters in comparison, and the ramifications to the environment, to the town's drinking water and things like that become a bigger deal because of those procedural things. That's why we're even taking the time to go through this exercise. So that's all.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
And the fact is, I mean, the 65-foot buffer is into a piece of his house.
Right.
Well,
He'd have no backyard. It's zero. His house is in the 100, and that's not his fault. But technically, he can't walk out his back door that he's not stepping within the 65. So
That, I don't understand what that has to do with anything.
I
Anybody who lives on a wetland has,
But I get that, but,
But it's
you know, I just don't think that he's committed the crime of the century, that's all. Oh, really? Maybe the second, but not
Thank
the
you.
Peg?
Well, there was certainly no malice aforethought here. It was innocently done, but we're trying to get away from asking forgiveness as opposed to permission. And honest mistake, lesson learned, and I don't think it'll happen again. It definitely looks quite nice out there. We were all
Yeah,
admiring
thank
it when
you,
we
thank
walked
you.
through it. We're like, whoa,
If they put that up,
Mhm.
they have to take that
it
up.
looks beautiful.
Thank you.
If they have to take
But going forward, we know you'll
Oh,
do
yeah, you
nothing
could.
further
Yeah, no,
without
absolutely.
checking in.
Learned
This
our
has
lesson.
been a hassle.
Yeah.
So. Okay,
Your turn.
I'm taking your role.
Wow.
I'm gonna be the bad guy.
Oh, this is a momentous occasion. Hold on.
Make sure you ask about butters.
I don't think there was any malice aforethought. I think it was an honest mistake. We have had a case in front of us over the last 6 months of someone who also did something, maybe not as innocently, but still, it was changing a deteriorating timber wall and replacing it with a rock wall. And we made that person take that wall down, actually, they're going to bury it under the sand. And we always talk about precedent here. We said no to the gentleman a month ago for doing almost the same thing that you did. And how do we face him? And the next person that comes in your situation, innocent or not, and say, we'll let this one go. I'm 1 vote at 5. I do not, I would love to be able to say, we'll let it go, that's fine. But that's not what I took an oath to do on this board. You know, there are bylaws, and our oath is to follow those bylaws. And Mr. Germain continuously says that, you know, that taxpayer, resident, et cetera. And I understand that. But the people who passed the bylaw are also taxpayers and residents, and they passed the bylaw for a reason. And I think the integrity of the board rests on us following the bylaws as they are written. And in this particular case, and I hate saying this, truly, I'm of the opinion that that wall should come back, and if you want to do something, you replace same with same, and you put timbers, you know, railroad ties back. But as I said, I'm one vote of 5, and I think the other people, they certainly are can make up their own minds, and I think that they've shown somewhat favorable. And again, this isn't anything with you guys; it's the bylaws, and trying to uphold them. And as Mr. Germain says in other meetings, it's not you; it's the next 10 who come in and want to do it. So that's my personal opinion. So now, that being said, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mayor?
Anybody from?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
I hate it when he's right. And he's kind of right. And the reason I use the word kind of right is because the other case that he talks about was a drawing that was brought to this board to get an approval on, and then everything we approved, then they went over and above and did a bunch of other stuff. So this was, the difference I see between the two cases is the one that we have a problem with was with forethought. This, I see, was not with forethought. This was an existing house. You went in, you bought a place, you saw a wall falling down, you said, oh, I'm just gonna fix this wall up and rebuild it and make a nice backyard here on the pond's edge, which is something that we could envy. This other instance was, this is a house that's gonna be demolished, and here's what I wanna build in its place, and presto, now we have stone walls and decks and stuff that's on the water's edge. So I see a little bit of a difference in the two. That being said, I do hate the precedent of it all, and I still think that, I don't know, if I had to push, I'm not sure. I mean, if you're gonna take the concrete retaining wall out, now we're going after the patio? I mean, where do you wanna stop? So that's, I guess, the question I have.
It'd be the whole
Could I maybe respond to both of your comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to ask you that question. Where do we stop? So what else do you want beside the wall is my point.
Well, I think that I think that what we need to do is perhaps continue this, get pictures of the current deck. I think at one point I sent you Google Earth
Yes.
photos historically.
Yes.
If we can find all of them and see throughout the history. These pictures were good, but they're not great. And I believe that there were photos from the water that the neighbor might have taken over the years.
Yeah, maybe,
Oh.
yeah.
So,
I don't know if
and I
she's
think
here
you
for
had,
this.
I know that we saw them at one point. So I think that perhaps in this particular case, we continue it, get more pictures, so we decide.
I think the abutter is here. I think do you have the pictures with you?
Yes.
So she has those, but.
And
All right.
could I just respond to the comments?
Yes,
Because
by all means.
It was something that I had kind of thought about over the last couple of months was, as I was thinking about the situation, I thought to myself, if this was 4 years ago and we came to you and said, if you could come look at our railroad tie wall that's kind of decrepit, falling down, if we kept the same footprint, could we put up a new wall? I don't know for sure, but I think over time we would find a way to be able to put up a new wall, because who would want somebody to have a wall that's fallen down, or stairs that are wooden and kind of dangerous for the kids? Really, they were rotten and they were kind of splintery. And I think if you guys looked at the wood that was there, you would have said, geez, I think maybe stone is a better product here anyhow. And I feel like that would have been approved, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but if that's the case, then what's the difference of changing material? If I could have come to the board and said, could we do a stone wall here?
I think that's true.
Well, I think he didn't change the footprint. Even the other case, there's a different footprint.
Yeah.
So he didn't make the wall longer, bigger, taller.
I don't think that's true. I think the wall is taller. And that's why I want to see more photos.
Well, then would you
Because
be all
what
right
I'm
with the
seeing there was
continuance?
a wall that was maybe 6 feet tall. The concrete you have now has to be 9 or 10 feet tall.
No.
No, it's maybe, actually the ledge is right, it's about 6 feet, yeah. And it couldn't be taller because
The ground.
the ground level of the next patio and where our whole yard is,
We should take a look.
it ends right there,
All
yeah.
right, so, all right, we're going to need to make, all
I'd be in favor of the continuance, but I think I'd like to hear from the abutters also.
right,
That all right with you?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Let us come down, take another look, and, you know,
And get
I'll
photos.
get some pictures that are.
photos and.
Yeah, we could do
take
measurements and take pictures and see exactly what we're talking about.
All right, does the abutter want to say anything?
Or do you want to wait till after we do a site visit and we have the next hearing?
Thank you for letting me address this committee tonight. I have photos here that will demonstrate that the site was modified and enlarged. It's absolutely been modified and changed.
We'll look at the photos tonight. Is there a way you could electronically get them to Brooke?
This is the
Yeah.
portion of the plan where you can see some of the
Can you
photos.
send me those by email too?
Sure.
Yeah, and then I can get copies for next time.
And then this is another section of the map where there's a debris pile that's still there and has construction in it. So this pile was pushed over the ledge. This pile you came to see in site visit on December 21st of last year.
Yep.
And there was snow on the ground, but this was
We've looked at this a number of
You
times.
saw that already,
Yeah.
it's still there, this is a
Blocks,
picture from last
These
week.
are 2 foot, so
Okay.
they're
And
6
that's, and
feet.
this is where it's marked on the plan.
So it's
And
not,
it's
those are only
shown-
2 foot tall, those prefab blocks are 2 feet. There's only 6 feet there, 2 foot,
That
so
was not being built.
over here is good 8.
They're 2 feet tall, I'm counting 4 of them, that's 8 feet.
There's 8 feet on this back side.
You'll see from those historical pictures.
18 inch.
You know, if I'm not too sure. Yeah, I don't recall.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah,
I have some.
I would have guessed
I'm
2
just
feet
not
until
sure.
you
The
said
MBO?
18 inches. Yes, it is,
So
yeah.
I think they're 18,
I think you're right.
but I'd have to measure.
Yeah, it is that, because we were thinking the 4 rows was 6 feet. It was
We just put
3
6
feet.
at my son's house, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how high we had to come up to do that.
all right, well, I think we need to go and measure it, and we need
I
to,
think we need a site visit.
we need another site
You'll
visit.
see from the excavation photo that there was no beach at this site, and there is now a beach. This was from April of 2019, there was no beach, no wall. And this is what May of that year looks like. I'm sorry that I don't have.
That's okay.
We
You
can
can pass them
share.
around.
We'll share.
So was sand brought in for the beach?
You didn't bring, did you bring sand on site? or you take it
No.
from the site?
No, it was just, you know, I think the previous owner might have put sand in there because it's forever been extremely sandy there.
And the pictures we
But it
gave
was a-
you from
It was
before
a
that site
vegetative, it
has
was
the
a
beach.
vegetative slope, the side of the pond
Yeah.
looked exactly like you see here in this photo, and now it's been cleared up by the excavation. There was a small path that went down to the water,
Yeah.
and that was it, a path of sand. There was no stairs, there was no retaining wall, it was completely vegetated, and the entire pond.
Okay.
So that's the before and after.
Okay, thank you. These are pretty, these are good photos.
We need to do a site visit, we need to go look at it, we need to continue this. Could you sign it, please? I'm
Sure.
worried about it.
Happy to.
Okay. So, we do need to go back out and look at it again. We need to bring a measuring tape. We need to relocate those Google Earth photos. I can do that if you don't have that
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, you probably should.
I can find
Who
them.
knows where they are.
Yeah.
Because it
Okay.
goes back 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And you
Oh,
can
all
see
right.
the history of how it
Okay.
evolved, and it
Yeah.
never really evolved to what you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
here.
send me those again.
I've got Google Pro too, so.
All right. So anyway, that being said, I will,
I make a motion, we continue 5 Johns Pond Road, NOI DEP 126630 until,
you want to go two sessions, the 17th?
Yeah, well, first, the next meeting is November 3rd. We could wait, you want to go till the 3rd, 7th, what's that, 10?
17th.
17th?
17th?
Is that November 17th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 17th, then we have time to get
Oh,
this.
we're out of town.
You're out of town?
Yeah, until the Friday, the 19th, or, yeah, I don't know if it's the
You
19th.
can
but-
put it off until,
After Thanksgiving?
after Thanksgiving, December, what do you say, December? You back?
No, November 19th we'll be back. I wish we were gone until September or December, rather.
Yeah. Sometimes like.
All right, so we'll
So our next meeting is November 3rd, 17th, and there'll be one December 1st, is that correct, Brooke?
yes.
Yep, that's the first one in December, yep.
Then I'm gonna continue this to December 1st, 2021.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to continue the hearing 5 Johns Pond Road, NOI DEPSC 126-630, to our 3 meetings from now on Wednesday, December 1st.
Okay, and we'll do a site visit, we'll set up a site visit, and
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, approved unanimously. All right, we're going to hold on to these, okay?
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, there'll be popcorn.
Thank you, darling.
You can give them to Brooke. Put them in the folder.
So I'll hang on to these.
You can hang on, I'll keep mine.
Yep. So really, we need to see the old wall.
Yeah, we need
That's
to
the-
see.
I
Yeah.
thought he had pictures of the old wall last time.
I think she did.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. So next up, we're going to go right to the discussion of Pine Gate Renewables, LLC, and the enforcement order that's in effect at their 2 solar projects, one on Tremont Street and the other on Rochester Road. The way this is going to work is I'm going to have the representatives from Pine Gate and their experts speak first and give you an overview of what they're doing and the information that they have regarding the safety of the timber poles. Just so everybody here knows, and everybody out there in TV land, yesterday, Brooke, the conservation agent, Kevin Ford, who is our health agent, and myself met with the representatives from Pine Gate to just basically go over. They had watched the YouTube video of our sort of informal discussion 2 weeks ago, and there were some issues that we felt that they needed to understand. For instance, there was a comment about the North Carver situation with water, and that was something that they had no idea about what that related to. So we met with them yesterday, and it was Brooke and Kevin Forg and myself. So that being said, Julianne, I think you're going to speak first.
Should we set up, we have an easel and a couple of site plans.
Okay.
Where would be the best place to place that?
Yeah, probably right behind Ashley.
Do I need to sign in as well?
Yes. Yes. After the presentation, if you would like to ask questions or speak on the subject, please raise your hand. I will recognize you, and you'll come up to be in the seat next to Ashley if you have a question or a comment. And I'm going to need everybody who speaks to sign in, so we have a record of who you are. It won't be a free-for-all discussion. It'll be one at a time. If you have something that you'd like to ask at the moment, try to write it down or remember it, and I will recognize you at some point so that you can come and ask the question. Okay.
Great. All right, we can get started.
Pull that microphone just a little closer, please.
Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Between you two, thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Will Fisher. I work with Pine Gate Renewables.
And I'm Julianne Wooten. I am Director of Project Management at Pine Gate Renewables, and really appreciate you guys taking some time to let us discuss with you tonight the solar Carver projects that we're currently building in the town. So just as some background, Pine Gate is a leader in our industry. The company was founded in 2014 and operates solar farms in 5 states. Our employees have a deep commitment to our mission of responsible solar development. We invest in local communities across the country and partner with national and international nonprofits to put resources behind what we believe in. We pride ourselves on being trustworthy partners and dependable, good people to do work with. So thank you for letting us have this time tonight to talk through the projects. We've prepared a brief statement and invited experts to provide some information and be available for questions to the Commission. So first I want to start by clarifying one unique and important aspect of these projects that I don't think many folks know. So Pine Gate is the owner of the bogs on Tremont Street and Rochester Road, not a tenant. We think it's important that the community understand that we're here for the long haul. We're not here for a brief moment in the lives of these projects, as is the case with most solar development. We're your neighbor. We're committed to the success and longevity of these projects and the positive impact that they will bring to Carver and the surrounding communities. We know the 50 to 80 local tradesmen, the electricians, the journeymen, the riggers, who rely on the project to put food on the table. The partnerships that we formed with the farmers working on these bogs is something that we take very seriously. We understand that their livelihood and that of their families is dependent on our continued commitment to these sites. Pine Gate's proud to be part of these innovative projects that directly support the local economy and bring us closer to a cleaner energy future. To that end, I want to reiterate that Pine Gate would not do anything to jeopardize the trust and well-being of the community. Now I want to quickly outline why we had to change the materials supporting the solar array, which is why we're all here today. Originally, we designed a steel pile support system that matched almost every other project that we've ever built. However, we haven't built projects on a wetland bog before, and it fairly quickly became clear there were unique site characteristics that made us reevaluate if steel was the best material for this purpose. As part of the development process in 2020, we performed a series of site assessments to finalize the design and the equipment for the projects. This is a standard step in any and every solar development project. Geotechnical and other subsurface investigations revealed a significant layer of peat beneath the bogs, reaching up to 30 feet in depth in some areas. And this is a feature that no one on the team anticipated when these projects were originally approved in 2019. We tested various options for support systems, including helical piles, and after installation, they were so unstable such that you could push them with your hand and they would move. And so for those steel piles, in order for those to have the structural integrity necessary for the array, we would have had to install them to a depth of 50 feet, which would have been drilled below the peat layer in the box. In addition to the structural challenges posed by the available steel options, there was also concern for the impact from corrosion of the steel piles by the peat. Had we stuck with steel, we would have had to replace these enormous 60-foot-long piles every 10 years for the project life. We know how disruptive this would have been to the cranberry crops and the farmers, given the significant effort we've taken during construction to protect the existing crops. These cranberry bogs have been in operation for over 50 years. They are a critical part of this town's history and economy. And as these are dual-use projects, it's incumbent upon us to design a system that protects and preserves these crops while also producing solar power. It's also of note that it is a requirement of the SMART program that we continue these bogs in operation while we are operating the solar farm. So it quickly became apparent to the engineers that we would need to move away from steel. The best alternative that was identified was wooden poles, the same poles that are used for utility and telephone lines that are installed today all across the country. They're treated with chromated copper arsenate, or CCA, which preserves the wood for at least, or in wet conditions, and the wood poles are built to last at least 40 years. Using the wooden poles would allow us to use fewer piles driven to a shallower depth, thus displacing less earth, and importantly, reducing our impact on the wetland bog while also providing the structural integrity of the array. Once the determination to change materials was made, we sent a notice via email to the planning department, fire department, and the town's third-party engineer to notify them of the equipment swap. We also provided notice in a cover letter that accompanied the building and electric permit applications, and technical specifications on the wooden poles were included in the issued for permit drawing sets that were part of the building and electric permit applications. We recognize that this change in materials requires us to provide information showing there's no adverse impact to underlying soil, water, or agricultural activities, and we have taken that obligation very seriously. We engaged independent engineers or experts to evaluate our plan, and tonight they will share with you their findings. The experts here have no prior affiliation with these solar projects in any capacity. I want to emphasize that these are independent experts who are widely respected in their fields and have no financial stake in the outcome of these projects. We asked them to review the existing literature related to the materials used to make the wooden poles rot resistant, as well as existing subsurface studies that were conducted on the solar Carver project areas. These items were compiled in order for them to provide their expert analysis on the potential impact to soil and groundwater. We at Pine Gate have reviewed the experts' findings and believe that they show the chemicals used to treat the poles pose no threat to human health or the surrounding environment. But you don't have to take our word for it. They're here to walk you through that. And furthermore, having heard the concerns of the community and to be a responsive neighbor and member of this community, we're going to be implementing a multi-year groundwater monitoring regime in coordination with our subject matter experts and the Conservation Commission. I'll give a brief intro on our experts before I hand it over. So tonight we have Steve Viteri here from Mabin & Associates out of Bedford. Steve serves as VP of the Environment Engineering and Infrastructure Group and is a licensed professional engineer, licensed site professional in Massachusetts, and is a licensed environmental professional in Connecticut. He's worked on behalf of federal, state, municipal, transportation, institutional, and private sector clients on everything from hazardous building materials assessments to soil management for construction projects for the last 20 years. Pete Dillon is also here with us tonight from Tetra Tech. Pete is a professional geologist with over 35 years of experience with geologic and hydrogeologic investigations and evaluations focusing on water supply, wastewater, and contaminant transport, including at Mass DEP. Mr. Dillon has held the position of geologic or hydrogeologic lead on numerous projects involving contamination characterization, including Joint Base Cape Cod, where he was the technical lead on the development of a large regional drinking water supply, as well as the technical lead for the investigation and remediation of explosive-related compounds moving through groundwater. Mr. Dillon has also been a Norwell Water Commissioner for over 20 years. So before we ask the experts to introduce themselves, talk about their experience and their findings, and then open it up to questions by the commission, I just want to reiterate that Pine Gate is committed to the partnering with the town of Carver and this commission to move forward together on these solar projects. As the new owner of these cranberry bogs and the long-term owner-operator of the solar arrays, I want the commission to know that the Pine Gate team stands ready as a resource now and in the future. Thank you for your time, and I'll pass it over to Steve and Pete now.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Viteri. I'm with Mabbitt & Associates. I'm a professional engineer, environmental engineer, licensed site professional, that's LSP. And in that role, I spend a lot of time studying releases of metals to the environment, how they interact in soil and groundwater, how they migrate, and whether they may pose a risk to human health and the environment. Was asked by the project team to look into the potential impacts to soil and groundwater from the installation of chromated copper arsenate, CCA, treated timbers at the solar Carver sites. I relied on published research and regulatory agency information to reach my conclusions, and produced a memo that was distributed to the commission. So CCA treated poles have been widely used since the 1940s in various applications, including agricultural and aquatic applications. They're installed, quite frankly, all over the place throughout North America. The number that I saw in my research was 150 million of these poles between the United States and Canada. And 80% of the treated timbers used in the United States are treated with CCA. And so these are poles that are used to convey utilities through neighborhoods. In front of schools, they're installed into protected aquifers, and they're installed in recreational applications in freshwater ponds. And they've been determined to be safe for all of these applications through intense study by EPA. And EPA did a study to support their use in these applications. First and foremost, they determined that people that work with these poles are at no risk. And they decided that the potential exposure to residents in residential settings was not significant enough to evaluate, because there's really no significant leaching of these materials into soil that could somehow reach a receptor in a residential setting. So there's been quite a few studies in the published research on potential impacts of the metals that are impregnated into these poles. Again, as I mentioned before, they're added as a preservative to prevent microbial or other degradation that would impact their structural stability, basically to prolong their useful life. And so, of course, chromium and arsenic are part of the preservatives. And so there's been some research into what type of impact these poles have to the soils that immediately that surround the poles. And so the proponents of the evidence has suggested that the impact to soils, that first of all, I should back up and say there are limited amounts early in the use of these poles that do migrate into soils. The preponderance of evidence suggests that it's a very limited radius around the outside of the pole, 1 foot to 1.5 feet, and doesn't penetrate very far down into the soil within that small radius, less than 2 feet into the downward. So these studies show that the impact very isolated, and if you look at the drawings or even go out to the site and look at these poles, they're spaced 20 feet apart in rows. There's a lot of space that's not in close proximity to these poles. So I think that's an important takeaway from the journal entries that I read and presented in my memo. And secondarily, the forms of arsenic and chromium and copper that are used in this preservative are forms that they're really built to stay in the poles. They're built to, and when they are released to the environment, don't end up in soluble form. So they don't readily dissolve in water. So let's say they're isolated at immediate vicinity of the poles. It's not easy for those to migrate downward through the soil to the groundwater. They tend not to dissolve in water. They want to stick to the soil grains. They won't move very far. Even if they did move and end up into the groundwater, they're not going to move very far with a thick layer of peat underneath, and they're going to, again, tend not to dissolve in water and precipitate out of groundwater and back into the soil matrix. So if you take that together with the limited radius, the lack of mobility for the metals, and then distance to any other receptors, the receptor being the aquifer and users of the aquifer, I concluded in my memo that was very little risk of exposure to any drinking water sources, water wells in the vicinity of these arrays. And so to complement my analysis, Pete Dillon did a hydrogeological evaluation. So my work is predicated on the possibility that there may be a release of metals in an isolated area around the poles that's not likely to reach groundwater. Pete took it a step further under the hypothetical situation where there were metals that migrated into groundwater. Pete talks about in his letter where that groundwater might flow.
Okay. I did actually also look at the chemistry of the arsenate, chromate, and copper oxide. Arsenate ions in the environment that is within the peat and within the Carver aquifer, slightly acidic, aerobic for the most part. That stays in a stable form. So that's the reason that Steve's seeing the fact that it's not moving away from the post. It's weathering out, probably out of the air, mostly out of the material that sticks above the ground from rainwater impacts, collecting there and staying there. Chromate, which is trivalent trivalent chromium, is the same thing, very stable and immobile in the environment. It's one of the reasons that they're using that in these poles. You're not going to put something into the poles that's going to dissolve. Copper oxide is the same thing. Copper oxide, on the other hand, as well as the chromate and the arsenate, are going to end up basically being grabbed up by the organics in the peat and being held there. There's some sand in there too, and some of this peat, but it's the organics that are going to help kind of retain it. It's really separate for the most part from the overall aquifer. So I did look at the geotechnical reports that have been done, and for the most part, these piles are encased in the peat and separated from the sand and gravel in the aquifer. And again, they're going to help. They're basically going to retain the small amounts of material that are going to leach. But I think the important thing here is that these are immobile. They don't move, and in order to move something through groundwater, you have to have it in the dissolved phase. Chromate is not is the hexavalent chromium is the dissolved phase of chromium. This is not, and it's not going to turn into the hexavalent chromium. The same with arsenate. Arsenite is the mobile form. It dissolves. It can potentially move through an aquifer. Neither of these are present at this point, and the geology and the hydrogeology of the aquifer itself is going to keep these things locked, the small amount that there is locked in place. So, one, they can't transport anywhere. And two, then I looked at the hydrogeology. As you know, sole source aquifer. Everyone's got their own well for the most part. There is one public water supply that's in the immediate area. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I did is I looked at the USGS 1992 USGS, which is about 10 years after it was made sole source. Did a study on the entire aquifer and looked at groundwater flow through the entire aquifer and produced a map of groundwater flow through the entire aquifer, which is included. There's a clip of it that's included in my memo, and it's the area that includes both these bogs. Miraculously, the USGS drew blue arrows on the map showing the direction of groundwater flow at both these areas. So you don't have to rely completely on me. Near SC1, the groundwater flows from west to east and discharges to Crane Brook. In the near SC3, groundwater flows from east to west at SC1, and then west to east at SC3, and that discharges to Indian Brook. Both eventually discharge to the Weantic River, and then we looked to see where there were any wells that might be down gradient, and there are no wells down gradient from either of these locations. So no one's using the groundwater at these locations. The upgradient side of Rochester Road, they're upgradient from the wells. All that water is again headed towards the east, and then the nearest domestic supplies for SC1 are about 2,000 feet to the east at Pine Tree Village, and then Copper Lanterns in there someplace too. But that's about 2,000 feet to the east. It's, again, flowing in the opposite direction. The water from these bogs is never going to get there. The one exception is there's a public water supply at the Berry Guys. That is down gradient from SC1. But that well, because it is a public water supply, is tested on a regular basis in accordance with I know they have a DEP permit because I have it. In accordance with their DEP permit, so it's tested on a regular basis. So I guess the conclusion that I got to is that one, you can't transport this material through the aquifer, and two, even if you did, under some strange reason which I don't see, none of the water from these bogs is going to end up in a drinking water supply. There you go.
All right. Anyone have questions? After you, sir.
Put the other hat on now. I read this report, and I see words like not sufficiently high enough to be considered a significant exposure pathway, based on assumed rates. They tend to not migrate. It only goes 2 feet down, which I find confusing on a pole you've sunk 50 feet into the ground or 40 feet into the ground. They're only 20-foot spaced apart. The first foot or so could be a problem, but everything after that is okay, except when the berries are floating, how the hell do you know which ones were within the first foot? There's very little risk. These are the same kinds of words that I assume were used 25 years ago in North Carver, when everybody said, we can dump this in the ground here and bury it over. It's no big deal. The problem I have, and this is the question I have for all of you, as well as Pine Gate Renewables, 15 years from now, when this goes bad, who is going to write the check? That's my question, because then it'll be a bankruptcy, and we don't have any money to pay this claim, we're so sorry, and Carver's back on the hook again. Unless you're gonna take this cradle to grave and sign a document to that effect and post a bond for it, that's the only protection that I'm looking for with these kinds of poles that are going this deep into a peat bog, because we don't know what we don't know. These are studies that haven't gone on long enough. There's been studies in Quebec, Canada. Was it in peat? It was only for 4 years. We don't know what's going to happen. The reason you went to steel, and it's only my opinion, is because went to wood, is because steel's up 400%. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I get it. And if I were a businessman, I'd be doing the exact same thing. But the concern I have is that the residents around this area are concerned about this. We are still in a battle with North Carver. And we just spent a fortune to fix that problem, and it's not fixed yet. And I was all for this. I did the site visit. I thought it looked horrific. I thought the tilting solar panels were wonderful. I was disappointed to hear you now own the land. That concerns me also, but that's another fight. Honestly and truly, what got me was at the last meeting, a resident stood up and says, what's going to happen when South Carver turns into North Carver? And I had to stop and say, yeah, I don't know. And I couldn't defend the project. And I was never a solar guy. Jim convinced me. I like solar. I think it's a good plan. I think it's helped the farmers. I think it's the way we need to do things. I agree. But I think that there's just way too much of we don't know what we don't know. And that's my concern. And unless someone's willing to go on the hook, and I do mean on the hook, someone's got to protect this. And if it isn't going to be the local towns and the local boards, and 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when this thing goes bust and the latest and greatest phase comes out and this isn't worth it and we're just going to scrap the whole thing and sell the land for a junkyard, who's going to write the check? That's my problem. I don't discredit this report at all. I'm sure you guys are right on the money here. But I think you're right on the money based on the information we know. And I drive my wife crazy all the time when I say to her, how do we know that 1 and 1 really equals 2? It's only because we've been told that. That's the best guess. Maybe 1 and 1 equals 100. We just don't know. Maybe we've been doing math wrong all these years. This is the problem. And there's so much stuff that comes after the fact down the line where people sit back and say, but we didn't know. We were kidding around today about Aaron Brockovich and hexavalent chromium and all this stuff that everybody thought was just fine, but it really wasn't. And you know, but they didn't know that at the time. So again, we just don't know what we don't know. So that's my only reservations. And I personally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see the Board of Health be involved in this. I would like to see more study done on this. I'd like to see, you know, I had a weird dream the other night where you pulled all the poles out of the ground, you wrapped them in fiberglass, you put them back in the ground. Now nothing can leach out. I mean, this is craziness, don't get me wrong, but my primary #1 concern is for that aquifer and that water supply, and honestly, solar profits don't even come into the picture.
Okay. Mr. Nowen.
I consider a lot of the statements that Alan has made to be fairly unbiased, unconnected to reality. But that's merely my opinion. I think a lot of people may have that, or they may have different ones. Solar has been grabbed onto as a way to avoid or to delay the warming of the climate because of the fact that it will allow us to produce electricity without polluting. And I think it's a very good idea. I don't know what the condition is of this North Carver, the references Alan has made to North Carver. Could somebody here
That's the landfill on the old Whitworth property.
Okay.
That forced 50 homes in North Carver to be on town water.
That's the North Carver.
Yes,
Not the North Carver
brownfield.
well problem.
Yeah.
No, it's the problem
The
with.
individual
we
house
ended up with.
well.
Carver that
Yeah.
Yeah.
two dumps, okay, that they had to spend money out of their pockets so they wouldn't get sick.
I'm going to have to ask you to wait.
Yeah.
We'll get the comments from everybody.
Yeah.
I know that we're chomping at the bit, but we'll get there. Okay.
Told you we need to
I
get.
know that the North Carver dump had some efforts made to remediate and protect. It had no liner, and there was a cover put over it, but it was kind of half-baked, and is due to very poor activity by the town at that time. The Board of Selectmen did not act very intelligently, in my mind.
All right. Now, I don't think we're
Yeah.
arguing the merits of solar. I think what we're here to do is find out, if you have any questions regarding the safety
Of the poles.
of the timber poles.
Yes, I do not. I do not have any questions as to the safety of the timber poles.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Do we have any studies on poles that have been buried to this depth and what has happened to them over decades? It didn't sound as if we did. Now, you mentioned telephone poles, which, fine, but the average telephone pole only goes 6 feet. These are going a little bit more than 6 feet into the ground.
So the studies that were referenced in the memo, they were advanced, yeah, so to a small, lower depth, a shallower depth, I should say. But they did note that the impacts only were a foot to 2 feet. The maximum impact to the depth was only a foot to 2 feet. And so the suggestion there is that the way that.
Suggestion. So how deep these are
Well,
going? How
okay,
deep
well,
are
every
these going?
Well, every scientific study is based on hypothesis
I
and
realize
proving.
that.
So the conclusions of that study were that the leaching from the poles occurs through weathering above ground, and the impacts go through the forces of gravity or inundation with water or other for heaving move a foot to 2 feet below ground at a maximum. And so the fact that there was no impact to the soil at greater depths, where the poles were installed to 6 feet, but soil samples collected next to the poles from below 2 feet didn't have any high concentrations of metals, suggests that even if they were installed deeper, those metals won't leach out from the deeper parts of the pole. It's the weathering from the elements above ground that causes the release, and that release only penetrates a foot to 2 feet below ground.
But there's no study that's been done on poles that have gone as deep as these poles are going for any length of time.
The studies that I referenced went to a typical installation depth for a utility pole, which is, like you said,
Yeah, which is only
6 to
6
10
feet. These are going a little more than 6 feet. And they're going over our aquifer.
A greater concentration.
Yeah, much greater concentration. I defer to you because you have probably more knowledge on this, Mr. Badger.
So there are some categories, I don't know if we're covering tonight, we're just talking about the safety of the poles and the, did you define what type of arsenic is actually in the pole, arsenic, excuse me?
Yeah, it's arsenate, which is arsenic with a positive charge of 5.
Tri or
No,
pent?
arsenite is arsenic 3.
Yep.
Arsenic 3 is mobile in the environment.
Very. Yeah.
Yes. But arsenic 5 is not. It's a stable form. I've got
Until oxidized and then becomes.
no, not oxidized. No, the pH in order to change arsenic 5 to arsenic 3, you have to raise the pH to 8.5. Oxidation keeps it in place. We're basically talking about an oxidized aerobic aquifer.
Okay. I'm sorry. Were you?
No, please go.
All right. So.
Yes.
I had my eyebrows raised on a couple statements regarding the mobility of the migration of these, and to say that they'll hover a foot to a foot and a half and not migrate beyond that. I only smirked before when you were explaining what the word hypothesis meant, only because one of my kids is actually studying the scientific method. And I was, just to irritate him, was speaking to him in the scientific method. I was like, hey, if you have an observation, and then then it leads to a question, and then you have a hypothesis, which is a educated guess. Right now, this is the operative word is guess, and that is based on the lack of, not to give you a hard time, there are certain results from testing that have led to a conclusion, which is.
Can I clarify something? So the point, the hypothesis that was proven by the paper was that the extent of the impacts was limited to a small radius around the pole. My hypothesis was that the reason that happens is because of the weathering from the elements of the above ground portions of the pole. So I just want to be clear that the paper reached the conclusion that there was limited impact at a radius between the pole.
Okay. How many studies that reached a similar conclusion?
I cited 2 in the paper, but there's about a half a dozen others that are out there.
So I guess the issue is how they reached that conclusion was also based on the parameters in the testing, right? So we're talking about a certain depth. We're talking about also testing that was done not necessarily in concentrations like this, and not necessarily in areas where that was agriculturally based. Okay, when they talk about in an agricultural area, were there telephone poles along the side of the property where there happens to be agricultural use? Yeah, probably. But we're talking about in where the berries are actually being cultivated, which is connected to not just aquifers in terms of depth, but where that water is pumped in and out of is also interconnected with water that eventually leads to people's wells as well. So in terms of the parameters, that leads to a conclusion based on your test that is a more favorable conclusion to your argument. But what I'm saying is it does not meet the parameters of what we're concerned about here as a board. Which would lead to a very different result. And I wish my son was watching this because he'd be extra irritated with me that I'm going through this exercise. But in all seriousness, the other part of your and again, this is just sticking to the chemistries and stuff with the poles themselves, is you were saying that there was no adverse risk from actually handling the poles. That is not opinion, but that is there have been studies where that is the opposite was the conclusion of that. So depending on, if you're talking about somebody who, well, according to our studies that were based, it just so happens that all those people were wearing gloves. And so therefore then, they didn't receive the same adverse effects. So again, I want everybody to be aware of the fact that I'm not saying that your presentation was skewed, but as if I was in your position, I would be pointing out the studies that were in favor of what I was trying to get across. The one thing that I will say that makes me feel like not such a nice guy, this is me being a nice guy right now, as opposed to me being Old Testament Dan, is that there's a letter here to the Conservation Commission that, with their concern, is that essentially implies that these delays are leading to this commission keeping local jobs at bay. And, submitted by an Eric McLean, Director of Operations from A Solar. I'm not even sure why this was copied and is on our desks. That when I see something like that makes me dig in a little bit more, only because I'd like to just focus on the facts and focus on studies. I do appreciate the studies and the time you spent to find studies that were related to this. Just doing a quick Google search, I found quite a few to the contrary. The other thing, I've been involved for a long time and have sought the expert advice of people I know that do a lot of remediation with drinking water and dealing with arsenic in Massachusetts, but also in other countries, and have had the fortune and misfortune of having to be involved with all that and seeing the results of that by simply taking a study that was convenient to my ends and not one that looked at the whole picture.
Just forgetting about the studies completely.
Yeah.
And just looking at the chemistry. All right, is that I can come up with 50 different textbooks that would show you that arsenic 5 is immobile in the environment. I'm working on a project right now in New Mexico with a hex chrome plume.
Mm-hmm.
The object that we're doing is pump and treat right now is pumping it out and treating it and putting it back in the ground.
Mm-hmm. In and around Albuquerque?
Actually, it's Los Alamos.
Okay.
What we're doing is looking at ways to actually change the chemistry in the aquifer so that we can change the hexavalent chromium to chromate, which is what you have here. As soon as you do that, it comes out a solution. It doesn't go anywhere. It becomes completely immobile. I've got an EPA text right there that talks about that. Chemistry straightforward. Whether it's a study that shows how far it migrates or not. They're stable forms. The copper oxide readily comes out as soon as you get near any sort of vegetation or organic. So the chemistry backs up those studies that he's looked at, but the chemistry is the chemistry.
Just out of curiosity, since we were talking about concerns of water, has there been a field test done of just water samples of that?
I have not done those.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Just
No,
the
I don't know.
The
just
timing.
I mean, Granger has some field test kits for short money that actually test, and they're not sensitive at all. I get that, but they would red flag something.
At the concentrations that you're talking about, probably not.
Okay.
I think that you would need to actually, take some samples and take them to a lab. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
these concentrations are so low, even the ones that you're seeing close by, a hack kit which is what it is, would probably be not sensitive enough to pick up anything, and it would give you something.
No, my point is, if it did pick it up, that is a red flag.
That would be a red
for sure.
That would be a huge red flag.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So.
So I don't remember exactly what the question I was answering, but I do. But I do want to make a couple points. Hopefully you go home and tell your son that the scientific method is real life, right? And it is used. But if there are peer-reviewed and published journal articles that do say something other than what's written into my memo, I think the team's receptive to reading those. And then evaluating those against the conclusions, and it's just that we didn't encounter those.
Yeah, no, and I'm relieved to hear that there is a groundwater monitoring plan. I would just, somewhere I don't remember who said it where. My notes are a little skewed right here, but in terms of testing being done, I know the EPA has that 0.01 mils per liter standard. Folks in your profession that deal with remediation of drinking water, I think, are looking for a non-detect when it comes to anything like that anyway.
Absolutely, at a level that we know is below the standard, so that we can say definitively that it's not present anywhere near that standard. So any sampling program that Pine Gate engages in is going to use the analytical methods that are adequately sensitive to look below the drinking water standards.
Yes,
that's for sure.
Yeah, one of the problems with the DEP suite of tests don't necessarily always include targeted things. You were mentioning a project in New Mexico. I too was working on a project in New Mexico, and they didn't have a problem with arsenic. They told me up and down. I said, "Well, have you tested for it?" And they're like, "Well, no, we haven't. And I said, so let's test for it. And
Well, I get that, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that
So-
anything that would be done here would include these three constituents probably, plus some other.
yeah, I think one thing that tends to take the emotion out of a lot of this stuff is testing. And so I don't know how, and we haven't even gotten to procedural stuff that had to do with this, the permitting of this moving forward without our permission. But even before that, before we could even answer the safety question, there are some questions about the studies, but also that water and area needs to be tested, and not only for drinking water, but I would ask, what the growers think about what's going to be potentially affecting their product. That would be another concern of mine. My last concern, and just because that letter kind of pissed me off, is I'm concerned about people's jobs and things like that as well. But let's not throw a letter to leverage our emotions, but let's stick to the facts as well as.
Can I just ask a quick question of the people from Pine Gate? Were you aware of this letter from Ace Solar?
I saw it this morning. I didn't realize that it had been sent to the commission.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
And I should say that letter has no bearing on how I would vote on anything. I think at a previous meeting, I had said that while I'm sitting in this chair, you're all equally wonderful and worthless in my eye. My job is to, and I'd be doing the public a disservice if I didn't do anything other than, as the chair has pointed out, to follow our bylaws to the letter, because that's what the town voted on, and that's it. So I'll pass on the talking stick to someone else, I guess.
Mayor?
Mr. Jermaine.
Wonderful and worthless. Dan is our PR guy. So just a quick question. What's the total number of poles in the two projects?
I can't answer that. That's gonna happen.
Anybody?
It's about 100 an acre.
3,200.
Between the two, 3,200 telephone poles. Okay.
So that, and it makes up a surprisingly low percentage of the land area that's actually covered by telephone poles. It's a large site.
I'll have a reason for asking if it ends up coming up as a issue, which I don't think will happen this hearing, but what is the diameter, what were the diameters of the steel poles?
They were going to be I-beams, I think, weren't they?
They were helical or I-beams.
All right, we'll say, all right, what's the diameter of
plan?
it? I have a reason for asking this, but what is roughly the diameter of these poles?
The average at the ground is around 13 inches.
Foot, okay, I guess the foot, okay. The only reason I bring it up is later when it comes up and we're talking about mitigation of impact or whatever, is that's a pretty significant percentage of increase.
Replication.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't even in the replication. I was
That's
more
down the road.
in the 13 inches in diameter times 45 foot deep is how many, cubic feet of arsenic and chemicals when you add it all together. And it's,
And we're assuming through the seasons that the pH of this water stays where it's at?
Yeah, there's so many studies that just the well water that's tested on a monthly basis for pH.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I assume.
It's certainly, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
There's no place in Massachusetts where the unless, except for a few places maybe out in western Mass, where you have some carbonated environments, that the pH of the water naturally goes above 8. Water supplies are required at this point to raise the pH of the water above. It right now would run around 6.5 to 7 almost everywhere. You raise that up. Water departments raise those numbers up to 8 specifically because of copper, because the acidic water in Massachusetts takes copper out of the copper pipes in people's houses, which isn't good for you and also rots your pipes, and then anyway.
Okay.
The original plans show an I-beam of approximately 6 inches by 8.5 inches, but it does state that the actual I-beam size and length to be determined by the foundation engineer, so that was subject to change, but approximately, it's an I-beam and it looked like thin metal, but 8.5 by 6 is what the,
So the impact would be next to nothing if it was only a half-inch thick. As compared to-
there's less of an impact, that's true. Somebody, we're gonna get through everything here, but I recognize you. There are a couple of things that I just want to make sure that everyone understands. And this is either for you guys or for you. Regarding the leaching of the CCA from the pole. It is your hypothesis, you said, that the leaching only occurs above ground, right, and goes into the ground from there?
I would say the studies indicate that the only impacted area is a small radius at the ground surface
All right.
to a limited depth.
Of about 2 feet. So whether the pole is 5 feet in the ground or 500 feet in the ground, it's only the first 2 feet that are impacted?
That's correct.
That's right, it doesn't matter.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
It's the underground, the interaction, interface with the underground materials is not what promotes the leaching. It's the elements from the surface. So at any depth greater than, if they're installed to 6 feet and there are not leaching, that leaching does not occur below 2 feet to 6 feet, that would be the same condition at 10 feet, 20 feet, 40 feet.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that was correct. Peter, do you know how deep the well is at the Berry Guys?
It's,
The public well?
It goes to the top, what I believe is probably, depth to rock out there is around 50 feet. The Berry Guys well goes to 52 feet, well screen goes from 44 to 52. So,
Okay, so
it's screened right at the bottom of the aquifer. It's screened below the elevation of where the poles will be.
Okay. All right. But it's near where the peat layer might be.
It's not far from where the peat is. But as I said, it is sampled on a regular basis, and when it was approved, because it's a public water supply, it was approved through DEP, which has a very extensive testing program, which would have included arsenic, copper, and ground chromium at the time.
Okay.
And probably is on some sort of schedule. I don't know what that schedule is for sampling of those constituents, along with everything else that you can think of.
Okay. Have either of you or your companies worked with Pine Gate before?
No.
I think so, but I'm not sure. I was brought in, I honestly don't know.
We've worked with other branches of Tetra Tech, yes. We've
Okay.
never worked with Pete or his office.
I'm
Okay.
kind of I was brought in for this. I
All
don't
right.
usually do this.
And Maybet has never worked with Pine Gate? Okay.
Nope.
All right.
It's like a magic show. We've never worked together before.
With the, and I think this kind of goes a little bit to what Mr. Germain had said earlier. I appreciate the fact that you're going to do water testing. I think that's very important, as Mr. Badger said, in making people feel comfortable about this over the course of the project. The question that I have is, what if the results come back and they're bad? What happens then?
You want to take it?
Sure. You would remediate it in some way, and Pine Brook would be responsible. Especially, so they own the land, so
Right.
they're a responsible party. So they're responsible for basically any sort of impact to any surrounding properties.
Okay.
So it would, in this case, I'm not sure what that would be.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So there are ways to remediate by you could cut off the flow of groundwater to prevent it from migrating. These are all hypothetically, if it did get to the groundwater, you could like a barrier sheet pile wall or slurry wall could prevent groundwater. You could put in well points, and you could hydraulically contain groundwater to prevent it from migrating from the, from wherever that impacted area is if it were moving toward receptor wells.
Remediation is a very broad term. Was there a technology you had in mind for?
I think I just mentioned 3 or 4 of them.
Right. No, I mean the water. Like I'm sure there are a couple growers that are going to be speaking or whatever. But in terms of the water's profile itself, matters in terms of.
Well, you could extract, no matter what its profile is, you could hydraulically contain it. There's nothing that would prevent that from being done, or erect a physical barrier, a subsurface barrier to prevent it, which would be effective, almost no matter what the chemical.
No, I just didn't know if you're thinking of like a giant RO that's also going to have. You're going to be pumping out. I don't know.
I don't see it would ever be RO, because that means you're taking all the other minerals, et cetera, out of the water,
Exactly.
which you definitely don't want to do.
Right.
There's lots of different treatments. This is all way hypothetical.
Oh, yeah.
I understand that, but it's a question that people hear.
We're looking at removing hexavalent chromium in Los Alamos with extra virgin olive oil.
Okay.
Believe it or not, and it works.
So there's a lot of things that could be done because metals in groundwater is not an uncommon thing in our industry, and in much closer proximity to residential receptors and drinking water wells than this site. And so yeah, that's an environmental problem that's solved easily by today's technologies.
And with all due respect, how many cleanup sites are there in the United States of America that companies went in, polluted an area, filed bankruptcy, walked out and said, hey, we're broke?
I mean,
I'm just trying to be that guy. You know what I'm saying?
I don't see that that's relevant to what we're talking about today. I think that's also hypothetical.
It's relevant to what happens 10 years from now. It's relevant to what I asked originally.
I'm sure there are many.
Who's on the hook?
Well, we all know, I know the answer to your question, is there are many legacy environmental sites in the United States that that don't have responsible parties with the funding to step in and clean them up. So if that's your question, the answer is yes, there are.
The thing is, though, is that those are legacy, all right? So that most at this point, it's almost impossible to get away with anything at this point. The sites that are bad,
almost impossible.
Almost impossible. But I don't think that that's the case here. I mean, I just don't see this as a site.
I'm trying to find something to latch onto that I can make these residents in this neighborhood feel good about the fact that you can put this thing in and make it work for them. I want them to go out of here saying, wow, I'm glad we learned all that. We feel much better now. I don't think there's a single person in this room that feels any different than when they walked in the door. No. You can come up with all this stuff you want to come up with, and until there's a key piece of information that'll make the residents that go to their sink and draw a glass of water and say, geez, I'm so glad that solar project's in my backyard now. I feel so good about this.
So if I could just
Could I? Is that okay?
There'll be
So if I could just recap
discussion.
the conclusions that the facts that we've presented today. The facts are that the impacts from this preservative will reach a small radius from those poles and will not penetrate very deep. They are in soil in a form that's not readily soluble in water, and therefore is not going to tend to be pulled down through rainwater or when the bogs are flooded and dissolve in water. It's going to stay in the soil, stick to the soils, and it's not going to get into water through the peat into the groundwater, and it won't even have a chance to get into the groundwater. If it did get into the groundwater, the geochemical conditions in the groundwater aquifer are such that it's going to stay in a form that's not readily soluble in water. It will likely fall out and stick to soil particles. And so, it's under those conditions, it's highly unlikely, if not impossible, that it's going to reach a water well that's hundreds of feet from where the solar
Highly unlikely.
And those are the the groundwater doesn't flow in the direction towards those. So those are the conclusions that based on science, that we presented in our papers, and so that's those are scientific concepts, and that's what we brought to the table here to try to share with the
And
community.
exactly what is the ramifications of the bog owners, or the bog growers, since they don't own them anymore? They use pesticides and chemicals to grow berries. Is there a reactive, what's the study on the reaction of the chemicals that are put on the bogs to help the berries grow?
That's not a problem unique to this bog, you're saying?
Of course it's a problem unique, isn't this growing berries?
Unique to this bog. So
I
we're
think-
talking about a regional issue where bog
It's
owners
every
use
bog uses that.
pesticides.
That's right.
Okay.
No, I think the question that Mr. Germain is
But
asking
what is the relation to
Is
the timber pole?
Yeah, is there
Is there a reaction?
potential reaction between the CCA and whatever the growers are?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know. No, there's no chemical reaction, and aside from the area in the close proximity to the poles, there'll be no increase to whatever natural arsenic is in the soil, and whatever arsenic has been there through the history of pesticide use in the bogs.
I mean, I have to remember that at one point arsenic was the pesticide used on the bogs.
I know, a long time. I'd like to hear from Bob Bentley, because he's
Yeah.
got bogs.
All right, I'm going to go to everybody. I see them, but I want to make sure that everyone here is finished.
I'm done for now until.
All right, I have a couple of other questions. And this is probably for Pine Gate. You said that the life of your project is 40 years.
That's correct.
The life of the steel poles that were in your original plan is 10 years. Is that correct?
Due to the peat, yeah, the peat would have
In the
eroded,
peats, in the soil that's
and
there.
it would have been replaced after 10 years, that's correct.
So the disturbance of the bog and the plants, et cetera, would happen every 10 years. You'd, in a sense, have to rebuild your array every 10 years
That's correct.
to maintain the 40-year lifespan of the timber poles.
Yes.
Okay. In the SMART program, which is the dual use program, is there a certain percentage of yield that has to be maintained per acre? A percentage of what the non-solar yield would be in order to remain a viable entity with the state?
I believe this is based off of the application. I think you state what is going to be preserved and what is going to be grown based on the original conditions prior to solar. I don't believe that there is a percentage that's in the SMART program, but I would need to verify. I'm not 100% on that.
All right,
So we
because
need to continue to produce the cranberries in order to retain qualifications of the program.
Gotta use the mic. You won't hear that on TV.
all right, you can sit in this chair right here.
Can you restate the question, please?
Maybe.
Yeah.
The question is, in the SMART program, which is the Massachusetts dual use program that was initiated about 3 years ago, is there a percentage of yield that has to be met to satisfy the state based on what the crop was prior to solar being installed over the canopy?
I do not know. I do not believe that there's a specific set percentage yield that has to be maintained. I think it is based off of the application that you submit and what you state in that. Before you, as part of your approval, you indicate what you're going to do, what your yield is going to be, and then you're measured based on what you've put in that application.
All right, so you make a determination of what you feel would be your yield with the canopy, and then you have to meet that.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. All right. What are the circumstances, or what are the outcome if you don't meet that?
We would lose our agricultural adder as part of the SOQ that we have. So we would lose part of the profitability of the project if we don't maintain those standards,
Okay.
those yields.
While I have you here, you mentioned that when you made the decision after you use ground penetrating radar, correct?
Mm-hmm.
To find out the depth of the peat.
That's correct.
And you said that you put in the helical screws and they could be moved by hand because the peat didn't have the support necessary. You stated that you sent letters to the town of Carver. Can you again reiterate? I think you said you sent the planning?
Via email, we sent to the planning department, the fire department, and the third-party engineering firm, Fuss & O'Neill.
Okay. And then you mentioned something about a subsequent plan that I believe dealt with the electrical.
So we had the email that went out, and just, if you have any questions, please let us know. We're happy to talk about it more. Never heard back on that email. And then when we submitted our building and electric permit applications, we had a cover letter that identified this modification front and center in that cover letter. And then the plans that were submitted as part of that application represented the timber piles and had all of the specifications for that material in the application itself.
And that was to get the permit from the town of Carver?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's correct.
And no one told you you needed to come back before conservation and get a modification
No.
for the construction used in a cranberry bog and whatnot?
No. We did not get any inquiries or additional outreach.
And no one within your organization knew this? None of your engineers knew this?
You
needed a conservation permit to build the project. You just thought you could just change the plan, send off an email, and we're good to go?
I think we thought that if the planning director was sent to Jim Walsh and the other individuals that I just referenced, I guess we deemed this as part of the development process, finalizing equipment, and it was, in our minds, I suppose, a one-for-one swap. It was a lesser impact, and it made sense from an engineering perspective. And by putting it in front of the planning director, we thought it was incumbent upon them to then identify, as part of their review process, whether it was necessary to come back. And we never heard from anybody.
Yes, we never heard.
That's because we never heard.
And one more addition to that, I think based on the input of our engineer, we didn't see there to be a difference between the two materials. And we saw that the difference in these two materials would not increase the impact to the wetlands.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you for those answers. Does anybody else on the board have any other comments, questions at this point?
I'll hold.
You'll hold? Okay. All right. Well, I'll now take questions and comments, questions for any of the people here from Pine Gate or their consultants. Mr. Bentley, you had your hand up first, so I'm going to allow you to sit.
Yep.
Yeah, please.
Can you sign in, Bob?
Yeah, anybody who's going to ask a question, make sure you please sign in.
Maybe you could put that over at this table where you're going to sit, then anybody that comes to it.
then I'll sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission. I'm Bob Bentley. I'm an environmental chemist. I'm here representing myself. I've done a fair amount of Google searching when I first started hearing about chromated copper arsenate. And what I found is that there's a real paucity of data for recent studies. You can't find virtually anything more recent than 2010. The most recent, or the least recent stuff that I was able to get at was 1990. There's not been a huge amount of work done on chromated, of detailed work being done on chromated copper arsenate. But I would like to sort of state what I found, which I think is somewhat in conflict with what the two gentlemen here are saying. I found that, I've read that leaching studies show arsenic and copper to leach greater than chromium. That arsenic leaches from the wood at concentrations greater than the federal limit, which is the Resource Conservation Recovery Act toxicity limit of 5.0, and that's apparently been found quite a bit immediately adjacent to wherever they've been doing the testing. And one of the concerns that I've come across is that all of these chemicals will leach at a greater concentration the lower the pH you have. So when you're talking about a pH of 8, we we in Carver don't care about a pH of 8 because we'll never see a pH of 8 anywhere.
That's right.
In the soils, in the water, anywhere. Even in your drinking water, you'll never see a pH of 8. It doesn't make it. If you're drinking your own well water, you'll see a pH of 4.2 maybe. You'll see a pH of 5. Or you may hit 6, but you're not going to go much higher than that in your own well water. But the lower the pH you have, the more leaching you get from these poles. And all the research that I've seen says that the poles will leach for 10 to 40 years. They don't stop leaching after a year. They continue to leach for 10 to 40 years. And it all depends on the quality of the treatment process when they actually build the poles and treat the poles themselves.
Was it established that, I don't recall anyone saying it would only leach for 1 year?
I'm not sure whether I put that out there. I might have.
All right.
No, that's,
No, that was a statement that was made.
But the
Okay. I just missed it then.
the information
You did.
I have says that it's 10 to 40 years. It's a much longer period of leaching, and it's even after the poles have significantly aged, they're still leaching. What was talked a little bit about was the speciation. Speciation of the various chemicals. You've got arsenic. You can speciate arsenic into arsenic 3 and arsenic 5. You can speciate chromium into chromium 3 and chromium 6. Chromium 3 is considered relatively non-toxic. Chromium 6 is considered highly toxic, known to be carcinogenic and mutagenic. And the articles I've seen suggest that there is some degradation to chromium 6. It does not just stay chromium 3. The arsenic 5 is the overwhelming majority of where you're going to have your arsenic going to, and the good news there is arsenic 5 is much less toxic. Arsenic 3 is much more toxic. Arsenic 3 is considered carcinogenic and mutagenic also. I hadn't heard about their groundwater monitoring program, but I'm glad to hear that there's a groundwater monitoring program that's being discussed. I think that it needs to be a soil monitoring program also.
Excuse me, what?
soil.
Soil.
Oh, soil, okay.
A soil
Okay.
monitoring program also. And I think that in the monitoring program, if it's to be implemented, you should be asking for speciation, getting total chrome, hex chrome, trivalent chrome, total arsenic, arsenic 3, and arsenic 5.
Mm-hmm.
And you also obviously need to be looking for copper because copper is going to keep leaching out also. I think it's good that the commission is looking at this. I think it's important. Whether it's going to make its way into the aquifer being pretty deep underneath us, I have less concern about that, but I have much more concern about what's happening up in the upper horizons, of the soils in and around the bogs where these are being placed.
All right. Are there any of the statements that Mr. Bentley made that you'd like to expand upon? For instance, he had mentioned the pH level of water, that the lower the level, the more leaching there is.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that.
Okay.
Is that you're not going to mobilize any of this stuff, but could you potentially? 4.2 is a little bit low. Most of the rainwater here is 5.5 to 6, but are you? Do I believe that in the slightly acidic conditions like you have here, that you potentially in the poles could get a little bit more leaching? Yes, but again, it's going to stay in the forms that it's already in and sit.
And I could speak to hexavalent chromium a little bit, and it's hexavalent chromium is sometimes an impurity during the chromium manufacturing process, and so there are traces of that hexavalent form of chromium may be found in the preservative, and that makes it to the poles. But if it were released to the environment, it would quickly go back to its less mobile and less toxic form.
Okay.
And just to speak to that normal rainwater pH of 5.5, I'd tend to agree with that as rainwater. But I've seen pH in well water that's low, that's, 4.9. I've seen pH then this is well water that people in Carver are drinking. It's not, and it's not just a guess off the top of my head. I have firsthand knowledge of that.
Okay. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Is that it?
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you. Thank you. Mr. Higgins.
Mr. Chair, Board, how you guys doing tonight?
Good, thanks.
Good. I don't really know much about the scientifical end of it. But on the business end of it, I think that Pine Gate came to the town with a plan and submitted on products. The products were approved, the plan was approved. From what I heard tonight, they changed the product, but it wasn't approved. So they had an approved submittal, and they proceeded without an approved submittal. Does the town just let that go?
That's why we're here tonight.
No, it's just a question. Are you okay with that?
That's why we're here tonight.
Well, is everybody on the board okay with that? I'm asking the question to you guys.
There will be determination of that by the end of this meeting. I think, that's...
To the gentleman's question, I had said categorically there are a few umbrella issues. Right now, we're just dealing with the safety issue around this. I had mentioned before that we haven't even gotten into the procedural side of things that we have a problem with, or may have a problem with, to your point.
Safety end, I don't know much about.
Yeah,
Bit on the
but
business end.
you were asking about permits and
Yeah.
building what was an approved,
Yeah.
that's
An
why there
approved
was this.
product and an unapproved product, that's all.
Hence the cease and desist.
That's true.
That was the reason for the stop work.
That was the reason for the work stoppage.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Forand, then I'll get to you. I see you're next.
So my name is Donna Forand, and I live at 278 South Meadow Village. I'm writing my name.
Thank you.
Okay, so I had a couple things. So I'm just reading a study done by the National Institute on Health. It's on a government website. And there's a lot of information in here on the arsenic in the water and the groundwater. And I think, if you guys haven't read it, it would be probably helpful to all of you on the board. And it talks about the acidic water and the pH of the water and things like that, and the polls. It was a poll study done, and I believe it was done in 2008. So that is concerning, reading this article that I just read. But the other thing that I'm really concerned about is the arsenic and the other chemicals that are in the polls. So when, I don't know your name, but when you applied for the permit to do a dual bog, did anybody consider that the crop of cranberries that will come out of there?
Yeah.
And what will happen to this town?
Well, the
And
original plan was steel.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but now they're using these poles. And we, in this town, have so many cranberry bogs. You could really, really ruin the cranberry industry for this entire town, for this entire state, by using these poles. Who across this country will want to buy cranberries after they hear that there's arsenic in the cranberries? We already had, I think it was in 1950, I might have my years wrong, we already went through this with the cranberries, and we had to dump a lot of cranberries. Guess where? In North Carver. So my concern is for our town. But I did have a couple things that I heard the experts talk about. So you did say that you could, if there was a problem with leaching and getting into the aquifer, that you could stop the spread of the arsenic. Was that correct, what you said?
I think what I said is that the form of arsenic that's being released is never going to go anywhere. you'd have to change the state of the arsenic from 5 to 3 in order for it to be mobile. And there's not just a study on that, it's just the chemistry.
Okay.
All right, so, but if for some reason it was changed to 3 by whatever, the pH of the water, climate change, pushing the pH of the water up to 8, or if they finally figured out a way to stop acid rain and that went up and you mobilized the arsenic, that there are methods that you would use to remediate that.
Okay.
And that would be under the current state requirements and federal requirements. That would be the responsibility of the owner of the land, which is Pine Brook.
So you're very well aware that this town has a lot of experience with water and the aquifer in North Carver,
Yes.
and how it is not able to be stopped presently, and we've had to put water pipes in and spend a lot of money on that.
I'm
So the
very
town
aware.
has a lot of experience in that, and it does spread. So, and we obviously weren't able to control it in North Carver. The other thing, none of you that are the experts or the owners are going to live here. You're not going to drink our water. So you could give a rat's whatever about our drinking water. Once you go home to your home and just come back and forth and check on your electricity bills. And the woman that was talking, I don't quite know your name, but there were statements made and you started laughing. And I'm like, this is our water. Like, you owe us a little bit more respect than to sit here and laugh.
She wasn't laughing.
And the other thing is, you use more space for these poles than what you originally had planned. So you're taking more of the cranberries away that won't be processed. And we have one of the best aquifers in the area, and I'm wondering if you're about ready to ruin it. And none of these have ever been built in this town before. And I thought I heard somebody say that you don't have any experience with these poles and cranberry bogs. Is that what I heard?
We're the guinea pig.
Yeah, so you don't have experience. So my recommendation for this board would be put a pole in, wait 10 years, and then have them come back and tell us what happened over that 10 years with the pole. Why say, don't say no to them, tell them come back in 10 years and let us know what happened to our water supply. And then, and I said the application that you put in, I believe it was done in 2018, is that correct?
19.
No, 2019. And I think that the whole process and the planning and everything that you had put in for the steel poles, and obviously the cost has changed. And I understand from a business revenue part why you did what you did, but you came to the wrong town to do it.
If I could just,
Thank you.
if I could just respond to one, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. No, that's what we're here for.
I think it's a little unfair to say that the town's a guinea pig. This is a proven, this is a proven product that's
Excuse me.
installed.
Before you say that, hey, you just made the statement that you have never done this. You didn't know that you had to stick steel in peat and it wouldn't stay there, because you'd never dealt with this before. So don't tell me that we're not a guinea pig. This is going to become a gigantic study.
Okay, so there are 150 million installed in the United States and Canada.
Telephone poles in the
Telephone
ground,
pole- okay.
45 feet deep.
And we talked about the impact being limited to superficial soil in the immediate
Are
vicinity
they
of
in
the poles
cranberry
and
bogs?
deeper. No, but they're in sole source aquifers. They're in front of schools.
We're done.
And they're in residential neighborhoods.
They're not in cranberry bogs and they're not in Carver.
But I'm not going to argue. I'm only stating the fact that these poles are used throughout the United States, and they're used in residential neighborhoods, on private property, public property. They're used in drinking water aquifers, they're used in sole source aquifers, and they're, and
marinas and everything
they're-
else, yes.
That's right. And
get all that.
so it's not an unproven preservation technology.
What do they grow
and it's-
beside these poles everywhere else in the country, besides grass? What do they grow?
So this
Are
goes,
they in cranberry bogs? Are they in strawberry patches? They grow blueberries? What do they grow?
I'm not familiar with all their applications in cranberry bogs.
Exactly.
But I want to focus on contaminating groundwater because the questioner, thank you for your question, was focused on contaminating the aquifer. And as a matter of fact, there was a suggestion that our opinions didn't consider the value of the aquifer, which I don't think is fair either. I think that our conclusion, in fact, is that these poles are a proven preservation technology in drinking water source areas and have not contaminated aquifers, and they have not ended up in people's drinking water wells.
I would disagree. I would argue that these poles were a financial decision.
So, well, that's the point that I'm making. Is I don't work for Pine Gate. The financial economics of this project are not my concern. My concern is to tell the public my opinion on whether or not the copper, chromium, and arsenic will leach from these poles to the groundwater. And I'm saying I don't believe they will, based on the study that I looked at. And all of the studies that I used to reach my opinion are laid bare in my memo. And so, and if other people have other studies, I'd invite people to bring published, peer-reviewed study and publish them as I have, written down, to
So,
support their opinions.
The gentleman behind you, Bob Bentley, was lying?
No, that's not what he's saying.
No, I'm not suggesting that, just as I don't think you're suggesting that I'm lying.
I'm not suggesting you're lying, but I
Okay.
do know that Pine Gate hired you.
And so that means there's no objectivity?
It does not. It
Okay.
does not. But the point is that you're not
questioning my
completely
credibility is what you're
removed.
doing, and I'm
No,
telling you that
not. I'm not.
And so
I just know how you got here.
Okay.
We didn't hire you.
so just to keep this all productive.
My apologies.
As I was saying before, the biggest difference is, as we were talking about, your conclusion are based on a certain set of parameters of what you've looked at. Fine. The parameters that you're dealing with now are very different than is this project's experience. So 100, 150, whatever. Just to be clear, just so that the public knows that that we're not crazy.
Yeah.
The parameters are very different. Would you at least agree with that?
I disagree with that. I think we have so what are I'm sorry, maybe I should ask what your parameters are.
So
you
what
believe
I
the
mean
parameters
specifically
are.
is
So the
depth of the
studies do not apply to the situation.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that parts of them don't apply. I just said, it's one of those things where we're talking about filtration, or lenses of how we're seeing things. You're looking at it from a certain perspective. The public and this board are looking at it from a certain perspective. Okay. What I think everybody's kind of wanting to know is, of the 150 some odd projects, are there any that have the same concentration and were placed in an area where there was actually agricultural use, where there was a product being consumed that is near or in about the proximity of these poles, where any leaching through water, through soil, would affect those crops? And were those crops tested? Were the soils tested? Was the water nearby tested? And what were the results of that? Answers like that would do a great deal of making your case for this application.
Understood.
That is my point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mr. Bentley,
They
may
don't
I?
have any.
Mr. Bentley,
But I would say this. I would say that the ratio of impacted areas around these poles to the entire area of the bogs from which the cranberries will be cultivated is very, very low. And so excluding
No. Just
so the impact is small. I think that's what I'm saying.
define low.
All small.
Define how many mils low are we talking about? Low. We're talking about a contaminant. You say low. What is low?
So low. So I'm talking about the area of the bog that's taken up by the poles is fractions of a % of the entire area of the bog.
Yep. But the leaching we're concerned about, eventually we'll be concerned about impact in terms of how much the material, the equipment takes up, and that's a whole different thing. But in terms of when low or hypothesis or generic terms are used, I want to see, less than 0.01 arsenic, less than, of those things in a potential water profile. What are those numbers? And I'm not sure that those are numbers that you could give us yet.
Yep. Right, and Pine Gate's talked about a testing program, and that's where those numbers would come from.
So I guess my thing is that's a great measure, but unfortunately it's a reactive measure, not a proactive measure. And what we're kind of looking for is perhaps some steps taken to, before you do all the construction and then cry, oh, we've got it all built. Well, let's get some things, because the poles have been in there for a little while. So if there is going to be any significant leaching, there will be some sign of it already. So my suggestion, if you want to help yourselves, is to get some water tests done in that area so that you have some data, and we could take some of the drama out of this discussion and deal just with facts. Sure. Because those will lead to peace of mind, not just for making people feel better, but they'll feel better because they know better now. And I'm one of those people. I would like to know better myself. So, thank you.
And also to Mr. Germain's point, crops. Now, you made a big point about, well, it's only so many inches, so you don't have to worry about the water. The roots are only going to go so many inches. So what is the impact on these plants? The roots are going to be several inches in. They're not going down 5 and 6 feet. So we're more concerned what is on the surface and what is going to be absorbed by the plants that are growing there. And cranberry, we were cranberry land for years. Cranberries are very important to us.
All right, before we get onto a conversation about the actual fruit, I want to ask Mr. Bentley, who's already identified himself as a grower, what are the safety standards that the industry has put in on your crop? What do they check for? If there were a contaminated crop, would they catch it?
First of all, I did not identify myself as a grower, but I am a grower.
I knew that. I'm sorry.
I don't know that the handlers today would be actually looking for those 3 chemicals. I'm not sure that there's an actual program. I know that they're looking consistently for any of the pesticides and fungicides and herbicides that are used. Every year, there's no crop that comes off of the bogs that isn't tested. But the arsenic, chromium, and copper, I am not familiar with how much testing has been done by any of the handlers.
All right. Would you, and I know this is probably just a guess on your part, but if a handler knew that the trucks were coming from this property with telephone poles with CCA, would they find a way to test for that, do you think? Or would they just say, okay, we'll just mix it with everything else?
If I was a handler, I'd be checking.
Okay, thank you.
I
know you had your hand up, so
one other comment. I've been looking in all sorts of different directions on using Google to help me find stuff. I can only find one study that's actually shown anything in terms of looking at plants, and that was with spinach, and the roots of the spinach actually had arsenic in them. It was determined that it had not translocated to the leaves of the spinach, but I could not find enough on that article to say that I know much about, know just how well that study was done.
Well, probably no one likes spinach.
But it did suggest that it was the roots of the spinach were very fine and that they were shallow. And if you look at a cranberry plant, the roots of the cranberry plant are very fine and very shallow.
Okay, thank you.
So this goes back to my other comment. I'm sorry you took offense at this, but we really, truly, this project does become a test, and we are becoming the guinea pig. And you say that you're going to put monitoring wells. Dan is 100% right. It's reactive, not proactive. Let's put all this in, and we'll keep an eye on things and see if it goes bad. We don't think it will, but we'll see if it goes bad. And that's all after the fact. And how do we put all this back in the horse? And that's the worry. That's the whole bottom line here with this. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not impugning your integrity by any means at all, so please don't misunderstand. But we don't know what we don't know, and you guys are doing your very best to alleviate that and say, well, we don't think, and most likely, and in all probability, we're all going to get home safe tonight. But there could be one person that doesn't, God forbid. But in all probability, do you know what I mean?
Okay, thank you. Yes, you.
Thank you.
I see you.
So I'm actually a good follow-up to Mr. Bentley. My name is Maggie Van Tangly Policelli. I'm a relatively new resident to Carver, but grew up in Plymouth and spent the last couple of years out on the West Coast and moved back. My background for the board's knowledge and general knowledge is that I am a trained toxicologist with a focus on environmental health, specifically in environmental or human health exposures to environmental toxicants. I have worked hands-on with arsenic, copper, and chromium in the lab assessing human health effects to those compounds, among other endocrine disrupting compounds, which aren't even a thing we're talking about with these polls tonight. So with that said, my background, and Mr. Bentley shared a number of the things that I was going to share, and I do have some questions as well for both the experts and Pine Gate. And I do realize you guys are consulting, so I have some questions about some of the points you made, and I have a couple of questions about the actual peat at Pine Gate, and I also have some points and suggestions of other things that we should probably note moving forward with this project. So my first couple of questions for Pine Gate are, presumably cores were taken of this site. I was wondering what type of analysis was done on the cores, on the peat, specifically around saturation or pH level of those cores.
The cores that were taken were specifically for geotechnical purposes.
Okay.
So as far as I know, resistivity was the only thing that was actually analyzed. If you look at the color, that can give you a pretty good idea of the pH of the borings, which would indicate to me that pretty much the pH is, again, the same as it is everywhere else in this aquifer, somewhere between 5 and 5.5, with occasionally places that's 4.2, which isn't impossible. But you're starting to get something that tastes like Coke or lemon juice down at that point, right? Yeah.
Okay, that helps, thank you. So what was the relative saturation? Was it wet soil, relatively dry?
Wet soil. Yeah, saturated.
That's what I figured. So my concern comes from actually the studies that I've researched and found that are peer-reviewed, published, and referenced often in the literature that show that out of all, again, specifically talking about CCA here, so copper, chromate, arsenic, all leach readily from telephone poles, regardless of age. There's studies out of Nova Scotia that demonstrate that. We've all referenced that. One of the specific studies that demonstrates that is a study by Coles et al. In 2014. It demonstrated that actually clay soils are the best at retaining the arsenic, copper, and chromate, and as you move towards more sandy soils, you see much greater migration, which is a concern here, because it's not just peat, it's peat with soil, or peat with sand, sand throughout our aquifer. That's what makes our aquifer great.
The actual boring logs indicate peat down to a certain depth, and then there's a layer of organic silt underneath that, which is basically clay.
Yeah. So the other concern is that groundwater moves through that peat, right, to a certain depth. Groundwater will pick up this, and this Coles et al. Study demonstrates that in runoff, in actual liquid rain runoff from these poles, you see concentrations of all three of these chemicals, in particular arsenic. Arsenic is the highest leacher that rivals and exceeds that of the minimum standard that is set by the EPA for safe drinking water of 10 parts per billion. It's readily over that, and that's in rainwater. That's in the pools that are tested in kind of normal standard use. We don't see what happens when we're buried, but presumably pools that are wet, we all know that under damp or saturated circumstances, these compounds leach. In damp, acidic, saturated circumstances, these leach more. The studies are there that show those individually. It's a synergistic effect, right? And it's basic chemistry. We know metals leach more in acidic environments. So that is a major concern of mine, both for drinking water and the berries. Berries are going to absorb this arsenic, whether that's at surface level or deeper. It's going to get into the water. And frankly, our aquifer is the sole source. There's no other option for us for drinking water in this area. That's up to, by 2019 population estimates, 150,000 people, and probably more, that we don't have another choice for water. Pulling in salt water and doing desalination is not possible. We don't have the energy capacity to do that. So we don't have another option. This is our greatest chance to protect our water for everybody that lives in this area, every agricultural entity in this area, every business in this area. What I don't want to see as someone that has worked on Superfund sites myself is my backyard turn into a Superfund site. Because if you look at Superfund sites, as you guys are aware, the most common contaminants are the ones that we're talking about right now. Arsenic, look at Atlas Tack in Fairhaven. Huge contaminant, huge issue. You look at chromium, same thing. It turned the soil purple there. That's high dose. But when we talk about toxicity and we talk about toxicology, and that's my background, the dose makes the poison. So yes, we can discuss how one pole every 100 feet. Okay, yeah, they're everywhere. Telephone poles are all over the US, all over the world, and they're leaching compounds, and it is dangerous. But you don't have them in a concentrated condition that they're constantly wet, they're constantly leaching their compounds, and just shedding arsenic and copper and chromate into the environment, or chromium into the environment. And yeah, maybe it's a small fraction that's hexavalent chromium. Though if they're using chromium oxide, that is a form of hexavalent chromium. It's a 6 ion. There's contamination with that in that chromium. That's what contaminated the Aaron Brockovich site to pull that back. We have our drinking water. It is our most precious resource. It goes back to the growers. We're not going to be able to sell cranberries to people and say that there's arsenic in them. It is measured. We know there's arsenic in certain types of apple juice, and that causes a major scare because arsenic is a compound that I would argue there is no safe dose for. It is a carcinogen. It causes reproductive malfunction. It causes immunological malfunction, and it is a safety issue. It is a known documented carcinogen by EPA. There's a reason the EPA banned copper chromated arsenic in 2003 for all residential products. I don't think it belongs in our even anywhere near our drinking water supply. We've got other issues to worry about, and that's just the copper chromated arsenic. Another common contaminant that's used in these poles that no one's talking about is dioxin. So the other treatment for these poles is a compound called PCP. One of the contaminants of that is dioxin. Some of you guys might know, dioxin is Agent Orange. It is known to be a carcinogen. It is known to be a reproductive disruptor. It is known to be a serious, biologically persistent compound. That means once it gets in, there's no getting it out. It's very difficult to get those organic compounds out of water, just like it is for metal.
There's no pentachlorophenol in the treatment for these poles.
Do you guys have that documented?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I retract the statements around dioxin. But my
It's on the SDS.
Okay.
For the product.
My statements around copper chromated arsenic are the same, and I stand behind those. Sorry.
No.
Thank you.
I was just because I'm very familiar with the study you had referenced from Nova Scotia. I was reading it yesterday.
Yeah.
one of the issues, and this becomes a bit of a rabbit hole, is that drinking water standards are standards that have been agreed upon for various reasons, and unfortunately not all of them have to do with safety. A lot of them have fiscal ramifications because of their dependency with different industries and so forth to produce jobs and produce products and things like that we need. So sometimes we've created some of our own problems, but the problem that we're dealing with here and tonight is this. And as I said before, and as we've gone back and forth of proactive and reactive measures, there are a lot of things that garner certain results, in favor or against moving forward with something. And just my opinion is you haven't hit the mark yet in terms of alleviating concerns emotionally, but also just all the data points aren't there in terms of being able to answer. And I think it's unrealistic for you to find a study about parameters that are a first-time case. But there are similar cases out there that do deal with agriculture and their effects, and we would like to see some more data on that as it relates to actual how these things actually affect us from a medical and health standpoint. There needs to be a lot more information, I think, that can be absorbed by the public, that are not a reference that happens to make your case. There needs to be much more. Yeah.
Great. Yep. So my final comment is, or my final question is, for what exactly the monitoring plan would be. And again, it is reactive, right? We're going to find out there's something there, and then we have to deal with it. And it's not cheap, and it's not easy, and oftentimes it doesn't get everything out. Like there's sites that are contaminated with arsenic, whether it be from natural causes, it's in granites, a rock, to toxic waste dumps, Superfund sites. How often are we monitoring? What are we monitoring? Where are we monitoring? And what is the lowest kind of what is the sensitivity of the assays that we're using to do that?
Sensitivity of what?
Sensitivity of the assays, I come from biology, of the technologies to do that monitoring.
How sensitive are the tests?
Yeah, so we'll use Mass DEP has a compendium of analytical methods that ensure that the sensitivity of those water tests or soil tests are they're low enough so that you can compare against human health risk-based standards that are developed from toxicological studies, as I'm sure you're familiar with. And with respect to the testing program, I think that's something that we're still thinking about. I think we'd obviously work with the commission to come up with something that we felt helped them hit the mark and was protective of the receptors of concern. So I think it's a little bit. I'm not sure it's the time right now to comment on exactly what that would be, but I certainly would be focused on the extent to which these chemicals have moved from poles to soil, and then also making sure that we have some groundwater wells that are positioned properly to understand which direction they flow if they do reach the groundwater.
Yeah, I think that goes to Mr. Badger's point that I'm not leaving here, and I didn't expect to, but I'm not leaving here any safer feeling than I am about what's going to happen to my drinking water, what's going to happen to my daughter's drinking water, and what's going to happen to my house value if I can't sell my house because I have arsenic in my drinking water, or what happens to Carver as a whole, or Plymouth, all of this area. And it's not knowing what the testing is, not knowing how we deal with it, and quite frankly, Superfund sites are Superfund sites because they take Superfunds to clean them up. And this would be another one of those. And I advocate that we don't form this in Carver from using telephone poles at a rate that's like extremely concentrated in a wet, acidic environment where it's going to leach. So I argue there's no safe dose of arsenic. Yes, it's set by regulatory commissions, but I would argue from what I've seen in my own hands, doing work with arsenic and copper and chromate, that there is no safe dose. There's no low al, no al. It's a no observed effect level. You see it, and you see changes, and they're detrimental. So with that, I would just say that, yes, again, we can talk about how one pole is every 500 feet on a normal lane, but we all know, and the uniting tenet of toxicology is that the dose makes the poison, and it's absolutely true. Everything on this planet is poisonous, it's just the dose. So with that, I would, cede to the board and cede to the next speaker that I don't think this project should move forward, and I do think, based on all of the studies that I've seen, my own personal experience working with these compounds, that these poles be removed and we move on from this project. Thanks.
Yeah, Will, would you like to?
Will Fisher with Pine Gate Renewables. I just wanted to come up and say a couple things in response to what's been said tonight. I think, first of all, I want to reassure everyone here we take these concerns really seriously. Again, as developers who are the owner and operator of these projects, who are the owner of the land that the projects are sited on, this is not something that we kind of brush off or look to kind of run away from. So we appreciate the concerns that you voiced tonight, and we wish to be responsive to the issues that have been raised. When we purchased this project from another developer who, originally permitted the project with the steel piles, and we came in and realized that those were not possible, right? And that precipitated the design change and the wooden piles. I would like to, again, offer for the reassurance of everyone here that we will put together a comprehensive multi-year testing program for the soil, the groundwater, and the fruit. And honestly, we are ready to go tomorrow. We can get on site. These poles have been in the ground since June in some cases. So taking soil samples at this point would give us at least four months in some cases of data of what could be present there. So we'd like to offer that, as well as to suggest that we would be willing to post a bond, as has been brought up tonight, to secure any obligations to do any potential remediation down the line. So again, I like to think of it as we like to stand in front of our brake repairs. That is, we believe, and we've had rigorous scientific look at the impacts of these materials. We believe these materials are commonplace, and we don't believe that we'll see anything in there. So we'd like to have that opportunity to show that to the folks in this room.
All right. There's someone out in the hall who's had her hand up for quite a while. Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Laura McNamara. I live at 246 Tremont Street. And I would like to thank all my neighbors that are here who are against this project, as I am. The first thing we're talking about is the safety and the health of us all. But I also have to bring up, it is the ugliest, I call it War of the Worlds. It is the most frightening, ugly, unattractive thing. How these people can be proud of what they've done down there is beyond me. And our property values are going to be affected. The cranberries, it doesn't make sense to me. If you can't use certain types of pressure-treated products on a child's playground, then how are you inserting these things over cranberry bogs that people are going to be consuming. It just doesn't make sense. I moved to Tremont Street in 2011, and my husband and I have busted our rear ends trying to rehab that property and take care of that property. I am so careful about what I use in my yard as an avid gardener. As a matter of fact, I had, for the first time in 10 years, my yard sprayed for mosquitoes. And I drove the guys nuts because I kept saying to them, are you sure you're using something safe? Are you sure it's not going to hurt the environment or the critters that visit my yard every day? Now, to say that this project is okay, I think all those poles should come out, period. Get rid of them. It's ugly, it's horrible, it's unsafe. And I don't know how these people, I don't think they live around me. I live on Tremont. But I don't know how they can feel comfortable saying to a new mother on Rochester Road, I'm a little too old for that, I've been there, done that. But you're gonna say that it's okay to mix baby formula? You're gonna be okay turning on your tap with all these high-profile cases? W.C. Grace, that Jan Schleckman and Erin Brockovich and Flint, Michigan. This is insanity. You need to shut this down and take these poles down, and they're gonna have to find something else to do with the land. It's ugly, it's frightening. It's like War of the Worlds. Why are we doing this? That's all I have to say. It's disgraceful.
Sure. Hi, sorry, I just have a few questions. I'm not so angry.
Your name, please?
Sean Bogart. I live on
Oh.
Cranberry Road. I'm not maybe directly affected by this, but I have some questions. The bog specifically, will the bog be expected to be rebuilt within the lifetime of the project? And if so, if those soils are scraped off, does that soil now have to be remediated?
That would be a Pine Gate question. I don't know if you...
I don't know if I understand the question.
The question is that a bog doesn't last forever. They have to scrape off the plants and basically start over.
You resand, yeah.
Yeah, resand, but also you scrape and,
Right, you
and
scrape
rebuild.
it all off and start from scratch.
What happens to the topsoil there? That's scraped off.
I would.
In our conversations with the grower we're working with for this particular project, we're not aware of any particular concerns around the topsoil there.
You haven't tested it yet.
Right. No, it hasn't been tested at all.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yes. So a test of the soil would certainly provide more insight to that question. But if we go by the expected rate and the amount of leaching that would occur at those poles, again, it goes back to the percentage of that bog area that would be impacted by the poles. And if you take the soil and scrape it and put it in a pile, you've got a little bit of soil that's next to the piles, and you've got a whole lot of soil that's not impacted by the piles. And so it'd be my opinion that the levels, when tested, to figure out what you could do with that soil, because there's a range of places it could go based on how much arsenic or chromium it contains. I feel strongly that it would be below any standards for risk, and it could be reused in some type of a reclamation project as fill. So.
I agree with that.
Okay.
what additional, excluding the pesticides, herbicides, other chemicals for the cranberry growing process, we all know that exists, but what additional pesticide or chemical treatments are now involved with the poles? We know the utility already runs through town once every few years, and they drill holes and they stick pesticides into the pole. They did it a few years ago, and there was quite the backlash as to what the hell was going on. So here, same thing. What other chemicals are we not being told about that are going to be maybe injected into these poles to prevent, insect damage, excluding the pesticides for the bog itself?
So the project life cycle for this solar project here is a little different than for a utility pole. So for the life of this project here, there would be no further pesticide or fungicide injection on those poles. The product as manufactured would be sufficient to last the entire project life cycle.
Okay, I don't know if I completely agree with that, but nobody's stated any alternatives. There's plenty of cedar poles throughout the world as well. The utility uses them, telephone poles, they're made out of cedar. You may have heard of it. Is that not suitable? If you need a pole because you need to fill in the area because the steel structures are falling, why would a cedar alternative not be appropriate?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that was ever a consideration.
Economically speaking, I don't know.
That's a fiscal answer. Yeah.
That's a money.
It's wood. It's wood. I mean, come on. But by the silence, I'll move on. I just also want to thank you, Chairman, that you have stuck to your guns through many meetings, and you continually state that your decisions in a project affect the future decisions of other future projects. And you all know very well there are more of these projects in the works currently, a couple that did not make it to the meeting tonight. So I hope you continue to believe what you believe, that your decision is very telling for the future of not just the town, but future projects as well. I do believe that is. Oh, also I have one more. They have mentioned a lot about water testing, and I just want to clear something. There is no condition as of yet that water testing will be performed. Is that correct? So that still needs to be created.
That's correct. That
Okay.
that was just something that was brought up in conversations recently.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Let me just sign my name here. I'm new to the town, and I live on Rochester Road. My name is James Gain. I've been in the construction business for 40 years, and I drive piles. Steel, concrete, wood. I've driven piles on the biggest projects in this state. I've worked with a lot of big contractors. When I walked out back, I work a lot. I'm tired right now. I left the house at 5, so I'm tired. You guys are getting hit with a hammer, you may get crucified. Who knows? But you're here, so just put up with it. In the opening statement that this young lady made, she said very eloquently that she's here as a friend to the community. We're here to be a partner in the community. It sounded really good. Well, it was a slap in the face when they changed from steel to wood. I'd like to know the cost of one of these 30-foot wood poles. I'd like to know the cost of the 60-foot steel that was proposed. It was 6 inches by 8 inches?
Yes.
I'd like to know the cost difference. I drive piles 125 feet in the ground. We weld them together, and we hit bedrock. I don't know what the weight of these panels are. They don't look that heavy to me. So I think that if you drove the pile, a steel pile at the right height, if it was the right thickness and the right depth, it would hold. You guys are engineers.
Geologists.
Same thing.
No.
It is to me. I deal with them all the time. So,
There are.
so basically, the steel pile will work. And I'm for solar energy. I'm actually looking for a hybrid right now because of the price of gas. I'm all for solar. But do it right. You know what I mean? Do it right. Don't change the game halfway through the game. Don't change it. I happened to be late for work one morning, and I thought there was an earthquake at my house. My whole house was shaking. The contractor had a vibratory hammer going out there, a roller, and my house was shaking. I said, there's an earthquake in Carver. And I went back there and I said, guys, what are you doing? And the whole ground was moving. No one, I want to know if Pine Gate has talked to the neighbors about the impact of these piles getting driven. And I don't hear any, the piles are going in so easy, those wood piles. There's no banging. I can, if you've been in this business, you know what a steel pile sounds like going in the ground. So they're going in relatively very, very easy through the peat. The soil is not that stable back there, but if you go down with the steel pile, and there's a lot of different methods for piles, it can be done, and it can be done correctly. As I said, I'm for solar power. The other thing that's upsetting to me is a letter that was sent to this board about the impact on employees from the community. I'd like you to name one employee that you have from this community. Just one.
Sir, I'm Eric McLean with Ace Solar, and I apologize to this board. I meant no disrespect at all for that letter at all. I thought it was important that you knew that it's local employees throughout Massachusetts. My employees live everywhere. I have employees who live here in Carver and surrounding communities.
Working on this site?
Yes. And they
I'd like to see that.
I didn't mean any disrespect to this board whatsoever, or the due diligence and the responsibility you have to your community. I meant none of that with that letter. So I apologize.
I'd still like to see the names of the people from Carver that are working on.
How
many people?
I'd like to see.
I have 60 employees.
From Carver?
No, not all from Carver, no.
One from Carver?
I do, yes.
You can produce his name?
He's a Carver resident. He can
Right,
produce me.
okay. So I
But I meant no disrespect, sir. I apologize. That is not.
And he's being paid a fair standard wage?
Absolutely.
All right, we're getting a little off subject here.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, so basically, I'm for the project, and I appreciate the board's concern. I'm a little baffled that one of the board members doesn't know about a dump, toxic leak in a dump down the street. I was kind of like, what the hell's going on here? He doesn't even know that there's bad water in the other part of Carver. I'm like, sweet baby Jesus.
I think it was the terminology we used to describe it, not the fact that it happened.
Excuse me. And like I said, I'm new to the town, and I know all about politics. I grew up in the city. I've been down this way here for quite some time, just a couple of towns over. And I like this town. It's a very nice, quiet town. And the water is like that, the young lady that spoke here, she said it all. That's all we have is this water. You know, and I hope that the board makes a good decision. I think the best thing to do is retract those piles. They make a vibratory hammer that will pull those out very easily, and to put the steel in. They're willing to make a bond, put some kind of bond up. I don't know what that cost is, but they need to figure out the math. If it's cheaper to pull the piles and drive the steel ones in and do it the way they said they were going to do it, or the bond, they're going to do the math on it. But that wood back there is not good. It's not good. And you guys, you did your engineering stuff there. Those poles are maybe, what are they, 10 feet apart?
20.
They're 20 feet apart throughout the whole place. So now you're at 18 on each end, because you said 2 feet, it leaks 2 feet. Okay, so there's 2 feet on both sides of it, all the way around. Now you get another one, the same thing. You got a lot of area out there that's getting, you know, it's leaching into. There's a lot of area that's going to get contaminated. And I don't know much about cranberries, but I'll tell you, I've seen them harvest them. They flood that whole area with water. And then the water gets pumped out into a general water supply, like a pond. I'm not a cranberry guy, but I'm saying the water's getting moved from there. Now it's going to get moved somewhere else. It's going to get moved somewhere else.
That's right.
There's some risks. And I just ask you guys to do the right thing and have them pull the piles. Have them get them out of there. They'll come out easy. And put the steel ones in. Thank you.
I know that Pine Gate has an engineer here. Is there any response that you'd like to give about the? I know that you're a construction crew. Yes, no?
I don't know if we have a response for that
Okay.
at this point.
All right. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Are there any other questions?
No.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for having this meeting. My name is Lorene Wilson. I live on Deer Hill Lane. Half of our neighborhood got certified letters, which I found interesting. A lot of people made a lot of points, but and I've heard it echoed, thank you so much. One of the first things I heard was about the integrity and the oath that this committee has taken. And one thing that really concerned, well, first of all, I don't like talking in public, I'm sorry. All I've heard, and I am not disrespecting you guys, I think what you do for your job is excellent. I understand the company. I also support solar. We have a lot of solar in town, and we have a lot more that wants to come. People talk about our economy, our history. Nobody's talking about the environment in general. And we have to find a balance, and we have to be responsible about it. It's a homeostasis that we need to find, and that's when you have the imbalances, whether it's with something natural or not natural. And we in Deer Hill Lane are being surrounded by solar. We're having our bogs in lots of sand, lots of soil taken out, a lot of it, and it has an impact. It has an impact on everything. We have the best water. I have been places where, have you tried to drink their tap water? Some places perk at 2 feet in town. It's close. The cranberry bogs, we've heard from cranberry bog owners. I'm not an expert, but I've heard enough about them and I've seen them. And I have the pleasure of being able to walk on these bogs. That water is moved. Quantities. It's just like a drip, or if you take ibuprofen for a little amount, it doesn't bother you. You keep doing that, and over time, it's toxic and it kills your kidneys. Well, that's what ibuprofen does. What does arsenic and these other chemicals that we're talking about? Another thing I'm concerned about, and this is where I want to appeal to you about your integrity, and I do believe that, and I've seen this in what you've said in your responses. I'm puzzled about the first couple that we had here today. And I get what you're doing, and you said your job, and you said it was important for follow-through and to set precedents. People are being made to take down a retaining wall that was coming apart on their property. And I get there's more to that, but then they're told they have to take it down. And you referenced and it was an innocent mistake, and I get that. And the only so I get that, but you referenced the case that was similar before that was done with intention and did not stick to the plan and went against what the plan was without permission. And here we are listening that this company that's supposed to be expert in this did the exact same thing that you were chastising about that first person about. I don't get it. And this is obviously either they don't know their job or they don't care. I'm way beyond third. Another thing that concerns me, and my profession requires critical thinking. scientific facts, being proactive. I don't understand why these poles are allowed to remain. You need to explain to me why they're being allowed to remain. They have never done a study in our environment with our cranberries. We have lots of subclimates here. It was pointed out. We know. You go to the bogs, man, especially certain times, you wear boots, even walking around the bogs. And the pH and the overflow, the way, I don't get this. And then the other thing that concerns me is the way these studies are quoted. None of it is about us. We don't know where these studies come from. Every study has control and factors. We know that, like you said, poles, people holding gloves. What do we know these studies are about? Are they presented to us so that we can see the factors involved in them? So until that, those poles are sitting in the ground, doing these things that our engineers and our experts of our residents have good found facts about, and yet the poles are remaining there and doing this potentially very toxic stuff to our drinking water, to our land, to the cranberries. And what about all the animals? Does anyone care that we wipe out a species because this stuff's going into a toxic soil and they don't know how they're going to get rid of it? No, they don't, because they've never done this before. So again, sir, like you said, we are a guinea pig, and we are currently a guinea pig at risk for all these problems that have been brought up. So I'm sorry, I just had to speak my piece and appeal, because I really do hope that you stick to what you said about your integrity, and I just can't even fathom that you could speak one way about a local resident in their retaining wall, and a big conglomerate, a big company that's national, they're telling us, and get away with this. Because then, are you being honest, and are you being biased yourselves? Can we trust you that you're going to treat residents and you're not going to favor business over the residents and the taxpayers? And you guys are residents here. You have everything at stake that we do. Thank you so much for listening and letting me vent. I hope I will be following this, and I want to thank all the residents that came in so eloquently, spoke up with some wonderful expertise. Thank you. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else like to say anything on residents or anyone from Pine Gate or? Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Chip Nyland. I'm an attorney for Pine Gate. You know, I've sat on my commission for 9 years up in Ipswich, a coastal community, so I've been through these hearings. I never want to see a lawyer stand up, because there's an assumption that somebody's done something wrong. So I sit in the back, and I'm just here to listen, but I think I'm here just to say a couple of things. First of all, this was not a bait and switch. As Will indicated, Pine Gate did not permit this project. It was permitted by Nexsun. Pine Gate purchased it and went about their due diligence to determine whether or not the steel would work, came to a conclusion from their engineers that it wouldn't,
and then came up with the timber piles, went to town members, town agencies, not to the commission, admittedly, but to others in the community to tell them what they were doing, and applied for a building permit, which they received and went forward. So I think it's a little different than some of the other situations that have been in front of you, certainly the enforcement matters that I was in front of when I was on my commission. And so in this instance, they were doing their due diligence, and they really did think that they were doing the right thing by the community. They bought the bogs, and so they do intend to be an owner here. I cautioned anybody from standing up from Pine Gate until all the residents had spoken, because I've been to enough of these meetings that it's very important. These people came out in an in-person hearing, not Zoom. We're here all evening, had very important things to say, which we hear and which we would like to be able to respond to. The reason I was retained is because you issued a cease and desist to Pine Gate to tell them to stop and to come back and to talk to you and to present information, which we did. And I'm not sure that this is unlike any other matter that's in front of the commission, where you have an applicant who's in front of the commission who presents information for the commission to digest. It's reviewed. People from the public stand up and say, we agree, we disagree, and there's a deliberation process. The applicant is entitled to respond. There's been a lot of literature that has been cited, some of it anecdotal, others that perhaps has been peer-reviewed, that we'd like the opportunity to look at, rather than to just reach a conclusion this evening as to how the commission will go forward. I think Mr. Badger raised a question early in the meeting, which is, have these poles been used around foodstuffs? I think that's probably one of the more important questions, which we didn't answer. We answered that it's been used in agricultural areas. We're aware of that. But you asked something a little bit more deep, and that's what I would be looking for this evening, would be a continuation of this hearing so that we are able to respond to all of the items that have been raised by the members of this community, so that you can make a decision just like you do for every other notice of intent, every other enforcement order that's in front of you, that you have all of the information and all of the facts. And you may decide that there is an enforcement angle that means a removal. Who knows what you could ask for. But I'd like to make sure that we have the opportunity to deal with that before you get there. We appreciate the time that you've put in. We don't want to put this community in that position. I go to a lot of meetings and I hear this all the time. Well, you don't live here. But we're individuals that have to look at these issues from the community's perspective. Nobody wants to be a bad neighbor. Nobody wants to come into this town, especially with renewable energy, and to have a black hat. I mean, I represent a lot of people that have black hats, but renewable energy usually isn't one of them. I mean, they are, and their intent is to do the right thing here, and that's why Will got up, and I said, you don't want to agree to give them money yet, and he said, no, that's the right thing to do. So I would just like to, I would appreciate the time. I'd like the opportunity for us to come back to respond to all the questions that have been posed, so the commission has everything in front of them so that you can make a decision at your next meeting. You may decide that you want to peer review our material. You may say, well, hey, these guys were hired by Pine Gate. Well, there was no relationship with Pine Gate. They went out and found the best people, and I think you've heard them this evening. I think that they're knowledgeable, but you may have your own people that you think are knowledgeable. You may want to peer review what we did, so you be comfortable. I think the very first point that Mr. Germain said is the right one, is that we want you and the residents to walk away believing that you are safer than when you walked in the door. And we agree that you're not there, but we would like the opportunity to get there. So we would ask for a continuance, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, actually, while you were speaking, what I wrote down was another set of independent consultants chosen by us, paid for by Pine Gate, no reflection on you at all. You did your homework, but there's always that little thing in the back of the head saying, who paid your bill? And we do that with getting experts to test soils.
Happens all the time.
We hire people that we know that are in the business and at the expense of the company. So I think that's one thing that we would like to do, and compare results. And I think that I can't speak for everybody in town, but I think that that would probably go some distance in making people feel a little bit more comfortable hearing results from an independent person who was chosen by fellow residents, as opposed to companies that are, I'm sure, very reputable. And in the case of Mabit, has never worked for Pine Gate before. And in the case of Tetra Tech, worked for them a long time ago on, I guess, one other case. So, that I think is one thing that we can do to try to move this in one direction or another. I think a lot has been said tonight about the fact that nothing is 100% guaranteed, and nothing ever is. Mr. Germain kept saying almost, or could have, or et cetera, and that's true with everything. There is no data source that's going to be 100% correct on anything. You could do a test on a pole in the ground for 100 years, and in the 101st year something else happens. And that you have to, at some point, you have to go with peer-reviewed data as best as it can be. And I'm not saying that that this is going to be 100% safe, but I'm saying we're never going to have an answer that it's 100% safe. And the same is true with the steel poles. Frankly, that's new too. What do we know is going to happen to the steel poles in 10 years or 20 years? We don't. So,
well, they're not going to leach arsenic into the ground.
Right.
But we don't know what coating is on there what's going to leach there.
The argument is, though, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that there are alternatives that are far safer than CCA-treated poles at the rate of 3,200 of them in the ground every 20 feet.
And still there. And shouldn't be.
I think there are alternatives, is my point. It's not like this is the only thing.
You
If we
think
can't
there
use
are.
these poles.
You think there are.
Of course there are.
You're not
You use
100% sure.
caissons, concrete caissons can go right in there.
I know, I understand.
Redwood?
I go back to your dream about the fiberglass.
Cedar, redwood, there's all kinds of.
I understand that.
Those would rot, they just have to be treated, not so they don't rot. That's all.
I understand
It'll
that.
last 40 years.
So anyway,
It'll probably last as long as
That's
the
right.
project's gonna be there.
That-
Poles have a life. I mean, solar panels have a life.
Can I say one more thing?
Really?
Yeah.
My concern is, I understand this board has to make a decision, and you don't have to make it tonight, and this attorney, would like you to hold off. My concern is, what is the time frame you're looking at? Because those poles have been in there since June.
Yeah, summer.
So my concern is, how are we gonna speed this up so we can get them the heck out of there so we don't ruin our water supply?
That's right. It's a
I don't
public
wanna
health
make
concern.
I would say our intention, I think has been expressed earlier, is that we would conduct testing during that time period so that we could present that to them.
We have a prior test. You should have done a prior test when you
That's
bought the
right.
property.
Well, we didn't know when we bought the property that the steel was not going to work. We assumed.
Steel works.
That's not our problem.
Fall went in June, and it rained all summer long.
It did, in July, it did.
About dollars
Okay.
and cents. Steel costs more money.
Mr. Chair, to you, one question. How long are these panels going to last? What is the life of these solar panels
The
you're putting
agreements
in?
go 20 years.
40 years. up to
20 years, so we only need something that's gonna last 20 years? or we- 40 years,
Solar agreements
okay.
go for 20
Different
years.
story, 40
But then
years.
the panels are junk. They're not gonna last 40 years. That's a myth.
That's not the concern. The fact that the panels may have to be replaced has nothing to do with the groundwater.
And there's poles going up all over, like Pond Street, Makepeace property, as we speak.
That's,
Well, we're under a cease and desist, so there's no more poles that are going to be placed by
But
Pine
they're
Gate.
still there. And
One
they-
step
they
at a
weren't
time.
approved.
We have to do this one step at a time.
right. We certainly aren't going to tell them to remove the poles tonight. That's not going to happen.
If he wants a continuance, I'm all for a continuance.
I am too.
I don't know what you're gonna come up with in 2 weeks, you're gonna change anybody's mind in this room,
Right.
but the cease and desist order, the stop work order remains. Nothing will change. If
We
you
have
wanna
to-
continue this case, we'll continue. We'll continue for 30 more days. The stop work order holds.
I didn't ask you to remove the cease and
Okay.
desist.
As long
I
as
indicated.
that's made clear.
But
That was
they've been working the whole time, all the brackets went up on 3 months. Correct. Come on. They've
Is
been
that a
working on
fact?
this whole
No, the
time.
mats were
Yes,
being
it's a
removed.
fact, we have photographs.
As far as I know, the mats were being removed, but no more poles.
The mats were being removed that were
The
over the
brackets
crim.
all went on.
All on top of the whole top,
At,
all the brackets and the hardware.
yes, it
On
went on.
Tremont Street.
Yep.
Yeah, they were there in September when I was there.
No, they weren't.
No, they were
They were in the
not.
back.
No, they weren't. They were way in the back, they weren't out front.
Nope, you're wrong. We do
Oh.
too, we have.
I called the town administrator on Monday, on Columbus Day, about the work that was being done out there. I called Mark, I called Rick, and I called, Alan Commit, no, I didn't call
You didn't call him.
I called Peter.
The,
The only work that was being
I'm sure
completed
Rick
after the
LaFlamme
cease and
went out.
desist was removal of the mats.
the,
That was
The
on
only work that was
Columbus
being completed
Day.
after.
the stop work order was issued the day after Columbus Day.
No, it was issued on Friday.
It was issued
It's
on
on Friday.
I don't believe,
It was issued on the Friday after.
no.
It was
We had the
right
meeting
on
Wednesday and it was
Friday,
issued that
And they were
Friday.
working the whole next week, putting brackets
Yeah.
up there.
It was delivered on Friday?
Yeah?
Yep,
She delivered on
Signed it for
Friday.
everybody on
Yeah.
Friday. Yeah?
Okay.
yeah.
That's not being a good neighbor.
That's
well,
it's lying to the, it's lying.
was that,
Strike two.
Yeah.
The mats were removed the Monday after the cease and desist on that Friday. I called Brooke and told her that there were
Yeah.
people
that was,
outside
that was
screaming,
Columbus Day.
And it was only the
removing
mat.
Yes.
That was just the
All work
mats.
That was done, yes,
Okay.
after the cease and desist was issued. The mats were removed.
If the mats are in place for more than 2 days, they harm the cranberries. We
Right.
have to
Right.
get those off the property.
And I didn't think that was, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. It made sense to me
No.
to remove the mats.
Stop work is stop work.
Well,
well, we can't-
well.
Stop
yeah.
work is stop work, and they own the bog, so it's their problem. Stop work means stop work.
Well, and
Not
that's,
protect the cranberries, not protect the mats, not do it, stop work.
Then that's
That's
my-
what it means.
then that's my fault, because
have
when
a-
I talked to Julianne, I said I didn't think the removal of the mats was an issue.
Then we would have had to come back for an
So
instant
blame
meeting
me
to
for
allow
that.
them to remove the mats so
I
the
have
so the
a
plants
So be
would
it.
be viable.
I have a picture right here from October 8th, from the Tremont Street project with no brackets on here. And now you go right down there tomorrow and you'll see brackets on all those poles. And there's a guy here in the picture too, working.
I didn't know
This is
that.
at 10 o'clock on Columbus Day, and I can show you my proof that I sent out an alert.
I didn't hear
That's
anything
not being a
about
good
brackets,
neighbor.
I only
And
heard
these
the mats.
poles should not have gone in at all after the change of use.
We should end it now. I mean, they're lying.
It's ridiculous to put everybody at risk like this.
What time was that picture taken?
This is a human experiment.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the stop work order didn't get delivered until, what, noon, 1 o'clock
Till Friday.
on that Friday.
Yes, and this
I
is,
emailed it to
this is October 8th.
That's
And
the,
now today, they're all up. So how do you explain the last 2 weeks?
Project manager here in the job?
Yeah, so I'd like to say something. So we had.
Gotta use the mic, gotta use the mic.
Sure.
Sign in, too.
You're not using
the mic.
Under roll.
So we know if you have COVID.
They're building the gallows out front here.
Do you want to consult counsel first? Oh, okay.
He doesn't,
no.
Bill, what?
he doesn't need to.
I don't need to consult the council. No. Happily capable of answering questions. Mr. Chairman and town residents, we received the cease order on the, I think, a Friday afternoon.
Friday the 8th.
Friday the 8th.
Excuse me, would you identify yourself and sign in for us so we all know who we're talking?
Sure. My name is Kolo Gude. I'm the project manager for Blue Ridge Pine Gate. So we received the order on the 8th from the commission, and we instructed the site team to stop work. The hour we received the email from Brooke, the email was sent out to stop work and start securing all the equipment on site and get all the people off the site. However, we couldn't get a crew. We couldn't remove all the mats because we had mats on several rows on Tremont in bulk 3. We couldn't get it removed that Saturday or that Sunday. I asked Julianne to reach out to you, Brooke, and ask, is it okay for us to go onto the job site and remove the mats? That was no work. We had to pull off the mats because we couldn't leave it on there because then it's going to kill the cranberry bogs.
Right,
because we didn't know how long the cease and desist was going to be in place.
I think that's been established, and I think that,
we
that's
get
kind of
that.
okay. It's the brackets on
The
top
brackets, no brackets were installed after the 8th.
You have a subcontractor installing the brackets, correct?
We
You have an electrical company.
No work was done past the 8th of October.
Chairman, can we not have cross-examination from the?
I know, I'm sorry.
Everything.
Could I see that, please?
Yeah.
That's okay. So there's nothing going on with the polls there.
Right.
This is October 8th at 8 a.m.
Okay. So they had another 4 or 5 hours to work.
You're gonna tell me they put how many brackets up in 4 or 5 hours?
I don't, where's the after picture?
Do we have an
You
after?
can go look at the after. Why don't you ride down there and look at the after?
We received the cease and desist Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And we stopped work. It was like maybe 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever. And I emailed all the managers on site to remove all their employees, secure the equipment, and get off the site.
Okay.
It was immediately done. I can show you the email to the commission at the time and can compare the timestamp. We did not disrespect the town. We did not disrespect the commission in any way.
So if you're saying
I
that.
was there, sir, at 10 a.m. I have text messages to all the officials
10 a.m. on
in
what day,
town.
ma'am?
10 a.m. on Columbus Day.
Columbus Day was the following Monday.
Right,
that
and you were working.
We're not working.
That was the
Again,
mats.
we're
They
removing
were
the
pulling the
mats.
mats off the
Remember
cranberry.
that?
Who put the brackets up?
Conservation.
The brackets were already installed as of the 8th.
No, they weren't.
She just told you that.
Mr. Chair, can you? You're all here.
The last time work was done on that site was 1 p.m. on Friday, the 8th of October.
James Leo.
That was the last piece of work that was done. The next
That was
time,
math, right?
that was that was not math.
All right.
Ma'am, get this story straight. It was the 13th.
All right,
Yeah, this is a little out of control here.
okay.
It really
Let's
isn't.
continue it.
They have a right to be this
I
concerned.
know, but it's the same stuff, let's continue it.
But they have a right to be this concerned, and they have a right to be heard, and it's a public meeting.
But it's not accomplishing anything.
No, it's not.
No, it
But
isn't.
If we're gonna continue it.
So,
Let's.
I would like to, is everybody all set? I'd like to make a motion that we continue this. And it's your choice. You tell me how long you want. I'll be happy to continue this till spring. So you tell me what you want to do.
Yes, yes.
You can't make them pull the polls yet until there's a peer review and we get more information.
Come on, that's unrealistic.
2 weeks, a month, what do you want?
Depends on how much.
I'll do whatever you guys want. Whatever. Brooke, do you?
We defer to the commission.
Well, we want to make sure that we have time to answer the question, is what Mr. Jermaine is saying. We don't want to say 2 weeks if it's going to take us longer, because we'd also appreciate any copies of any literature that, you know, I think we can find the Nova Scotia report, I think we're aware of that, but if there's anything else that Mr. Badger or others have. What's that? Yeah, I would think 30 days would be appropriate, and then what we would do is we would give you a material a week in advance, so that you would have that, you know, we wouldn't just bring it at the night of the hearing.
I'd also want you to bring a Plan B,
Well, I think.
an
it's clear that-
alternative to these polls.
I think it's clear that we would look at alternatives. I did hear you on that, and if
That's a
that
great
included
idea.
a Plan B, then when we would.
I'll
we
be
would do
honest
that.
with you, I think that's the only way it's gonna fly with this audience. And honestly and truly, we work for these guys.
Yeah. I understand that, and we all do.
Do we get the peer review while they're getting?
Yeah, we can get the peer
Do we do a
review.
peer review while you're getting your?
They can get a Plan
Do we do
B.
that?
I would, that would be up to the commission, but that
I
would
would
make
say so,
sense instead
yeah.
of waiting.
Yeah.
And you
I'd
can
like to see
certainly,
water samples done right away, so we have some comparative numbers. Start taking a look at some of that, so we get an idea of what's in that bog and what's going on. This is what I said 2 weeks ago, when I said, we are not engineers and we are not scientists.
Right.
We have to rely on,
All right, so,
Expert opinions.
all right, we have a motion to continue until
continue
the
to December,
17th. No, November 17th.
No,
No, they want a
they
month.
want 30 days. It's
Well, that's
December,
28 days.
it's December 1st.
December 1?
December 1st.
whatever,
they asked for.
whatever day of the week that you
We meet on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
4
either the-
weeks from today, 28 days is the 17th of November.
And that's the next, that would be the following, the third hearing, right? The 17th.
Yes, that's
You
28
want to do the
days.
17th? I'm fine with that.
All right.
November 17th, at which time they'll have a Plan B, results of some water testing, and ground contamination if there's any, and we will have an outside peer review.
And also answers to the questions that were raised
Answers to the
tonight.
questions.
and that no work will take place.
And the
Yes.
stop work order remains in effect.
Yes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to continue the hearing until November 17th, with the conditions Mr. Germain has put forth.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes.
Those were all the, just so this isn't a stretched out and staggered process, is that all, those are all the questions that we want answered?
Is there something else you can think of?
Well, I heard water testing, I didn't hear soil testing. We're going to also get some studies to share with them as well.
Yes.
To help them with their potential Plan B.
Make that an amendment.
Okay.
I'm okay with the soil testing.
Yeah?
Okay.
So we're going water, soil?
All right.
Yeah, and you know.
Is this a third party or them?
No, a third party.
Third party. The other thing that was sort of glossed over, and that more has to do with the cranberry production, and that not so much the cranberry production, but the movement of water in the bogs themselves. I never got a chance to bring up, but what happens to that actual effluent that's pumped out as the growing and harvesting process happens, because it's not just a stagnant body of water, it's a moving system.
But are they going to do dry pick or are you going to do wet pick?
No, they're going to wet pick.
Either way, yeah.
Well, I didn't know, they might be going to go dry pick, that would make a difference.
Yeah. So just as I think I use the terminology, to help you help yourselves, I would have some answers as to understanding that the migration of these contaminants is going to be based on the functionality of this bog is going to be much more than that 1.5 to 2 feet difference, times a factor of 3,200 poles. Is that right? So.
And how deep are these holes?
Right. There. Yeah. I mean, but just those are some things that I think we'll want to have maybe a little deeper understanding of.
Yeah, so I would say that, as far as the cranberries are concerned, the bogs themselves, the source of the water for flooding during harvest, and after the harvest is done, where the water goes back out.
Yeah.
Okay. Then another amendment.
I didn't write those down. Peter, did you write those? We're all set?
Because this has gone off the rails now.
What, the continuance?
No, the motion. Do you have any idea what the motion consists of now? Because I don't.
We need to make a new motion. But let's start with a new motion, let's start over.
They got all the questions.
Do you want to make the motion with
Make the
everything?
Have it quiet.
All right, can we
have a moment, please? Thank you. So, since we're all confused now about what the motion really is, we're going to continue this to November 17th. The stop work order remains in effect.
Yes.
You will come back on November 17th with a Plan B alternative to these CCA-treated poles. We'll also have soil test results water test results, water flow,
Water flow for harvest, at harvest time.
and what was your thing?
No, that was,
Okay, that was that. So we're good?
That's everything?
Plan B.
We did Plan
We
B
did
first.
Plan B.
Plan B.
And answering all the questions that were brought up this evening.
And some we haven't even thought of yet.
Is the soil going to be tested next to the poles or just in general?
No, we want to, I'd like to have, well, let me get a second to that first.
I'll
Yeah.
second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded.
So let's get this voted on, and then we can do a subject to further conditions if we want them.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to continue this to November 17th with the conditions
And
put
what I
forth
said.
by Mr. Germain. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it's 4-0 absent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, for clarification purposes, I'd like to see the water testing, the soil testing done within 6 inches of the pole, and also 10 feet away from the pole incrementally. So 6 inches, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, we're back to another pole. And I want to see the readings for that. And I want to see the readings on, I don't know, pick a number. How many would you like?
How many poles? How far
Well, we're not
apart?
doing 3,200.
Well, no, we're not, obviously, but I
No.
mean, do we want to skip like 5 rows and then do the next one, or how are you?
Want to do that?
I think that's an awful lot.
So we're not going to be able to get
Overkill?
something in 6 inches.
So-
I think that's a bit much.
So just to have some balance, because really what we're looking for are red flags. I would pick 10 spread out sections. One, I would certainly start with where this construction began, because those are the ones that were in first. Those are the ones that would have leached the most by now.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay,
Yeah, makes sense.
you'd have one sample taken directly within a foot of that pole, that set of
I'd
poles.
like it within 6 inches.
Okay, and then, somewhere in between, so we have an idea of what the water profile is. And then I would pick a total of 10 spread out locations in that bog beyond that.
In both bogs.
Well, in both bogs, excuse me, yeah.
It's 2
They're
locations.
claiming that there's no leachate from these poles. How are we going to even, expect to find anything without long-term?
We're not, but we're looking for a starting point to see, we want to see where we're at to begin with.
Okay.
And we want these done by a certified lab, by the way.
Yeah,
of course.
Okay?
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Is there a,
Who picks the lab?
Is there a way to core for the
It's
the soil sample?
Massachusetts certified lab
They're
certification.
only a
That
limit,
you are hiring.
Oh, no.
but no, they're limited, and we're not hired. You send it to them,
Yeah.
and then you pay them for it.
Right.
They're overseen by the state.
is there a way you could ask your neighbors perhaps across the street with other bogs that have not had the poles on it yet to take a soil sample there, so we have a base to start with?
Absolutely, yeah.
That'd be good.
And can we just clarify that the stop work order is in place, but there will be workers doing this sampling, so just to, the stop work order excludes this aspect?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The question is
Yeah, but we expect nobody to be climbing poles with a hammer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, are you looking at, when you're saying 6 inches from the pole, you're talking about how deep?
Away.
Deep or distance
No,
from?
distance from the pole.
Right,
6
but
inches.
what depth?
You tell me it's
We'd
gonna
say-
go down 2 feet, so what do you want, everybody? Wanna go a foot?
Foot.
It's gonna leach at the top.
No, I that's fine, I wanna,
We're not
Those are
trying to
soil
croak it, we're just trying to get a baseline here.
I get it.
And those are soil samples.
Soil, right, and we would like some water testing.
So the water testing would need to then be much deeper. And I don't, No, that
Maybe
is-
we need to go down maybe like 5 or 6 inches, you think, maybe?
No, we said a foot.
Feet,
I'd suggest topsoil and 6 inches.
topsoil in 6 inches sounds perfect to me, the man is
Yeah.
a scientist.
Man knows what he's talking about.
Is anybody from the Concom going to be there while they're doing these sampling?
That's not something
I
that,
mean, you know, it's just a good faith.
6 inches.
You know, they were supposed
Usually you
to
do like
work
1 to
in good
3,
faith
6 to
here.
9.
They switched the plans.
1 to 3, 6 to 9.
Now these poles are in, and everyone's gonna have to live with it.
That's
And who knows what's happening to the water, not to mention the environmental impact on our animals and
Can we
fish.
have our private wells tested and send them the bill?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
So if the poles have been in since June and it's rained all season long, and we're gonna continue this to November.
Water
We've got a lot of rain.
So one thing I can say as someone who's dealt with a lot with water filtration and testing and so forth, when samples are taken by a state approved agency, it is a third party, no matter who's paying for the testing. They're doing on behalf of, when the testing is actually done, it's not a skewed thing. Your request to have somebody from this body overseeing is a little tricky because of the custody of that information, unless we're literally arm in arm with the people testing and then going to the lab and overseeing the testing, assuming we're familiar with the apparatus they're using for running through the suite of that water profile. That's unfortunately, not that I'm just speaking for myself, not that I don't care, I do, probably to a fault, but that it won't happen.
So, Mr. Chairman, we will notify the commission when we're going to be taking the sampling.
All right.
If somebody wants to
That would-
come
you know
by
what?
to
That
make
would be great.
sure that, we're taking it there, then
If
if that's...
nothing else,
right.
it gets logged in, so if there's a complaint, we can
If
say
you're-
they called, this is what they're doing today.
That's fine.
If you're able to,
Communication is
fine. If
key.
not, at least we will notify.
All right.
Brooke will give you her home phone number, you just give her a call anytime, day or night, doesn't matter.
I assume she has
He's already got-
email,
okay,
right?
already
She has email, so we'll send it to her.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're done with this.
And just
Sorry, you
some
know-
other things that did come up, just so it was brought up in terms of who meant to do what and when and stuff. This whole hearing has been primarily about the safety stuff, environmental impact, habitat impact has been brought up and all those things. Procedural stuff has not really been the focus of this hearing.
Well, it's
We'll get to that.
Right, and that's why I was here.
Yeah.
To handle the procedural ones.
Right.
That's why I
Right.
stood up for the
We got
continue.
more stuff done tonight, and they didn't get any further along, so.
Yep.
And I'm gonna ask the residents, I'm sorry, I know you're frustrated, I know you would have liked us as a commission to say, pull every single one of those poles out,
Absolutely.
pack it all up and go home.
You're right.
But,
Not gonna lie, transparency, that's it.
and there's no doubt that that's exactly what I think, would make all of you very happy. I'm not convinced that it wouldn't please me
I
yet.
think everybody's really concerned with that.
I think we are,
Human
too.
health experiment that's happening, and they have children and grandchildren. Their wells are literally feet away from this project, feet away from this
I know.
project. And they have little toddlers running around, and their kids, and their elderly people that are concerned. I think it's really a human experiment on us. There's one thing, an old saying around these parts, it's know your farmer, okay? And we don't know this farmer, and we don't know what's gonna happen to our beloved little red historical berries, okay? It's a big, huge issue.
Well, this comes back to a bigger problem.
And we don't know how they got there.
That's
Without
right.
being permitted by this board. So, and it's happening other places, and it concerns me that there's poles going in over at Swan Hole and all over this town, and nobody's doing anything about it. They're in, and it's too late. It's in, and who knows what's already happened there. These people's wells are right there, right abutting this project. And that's not a safety net for these people.
No, I
On
understand.
Rochester Road especially, I'm not, and if we're not even talking about our rare brook lamprey fish that, they use, our rivers and streams have been corrupt, putting culverts and dams and everything else. And not to mention every species that come to these ponds to feed on these fish. And they're gonna be polluted by all this. We're not even speaking about the animals that can't even speak for themselves. So, that's all.
Okay.
We're gonna ask you to be patient for 30 days.
We will. And we appreciate you. We thank you for your consideration on this matter and listening to these residents. And I assure you, there's going to be more.
Oh, there will.
And they're going to grow, like what happened down in, on Plymouth Street with that, the guy who earned Toxic Action's Dirty Dozen Award, Mr. Whitworth, for his polluting that dump down there. But all of those residents' wells got polluted. And I'm not even talking North Carver, but I remember getting signatures at Shaw's Supermarket, 2,000 in a weekend, because people were sick of Carver's water being polluted. And here we are again. You know, here we are again.
That's right.
And it's unfortunate.
That's why I say we don't know what we don't know.
They're already in. You put these holes in without asking anybody. How could you do that?
That's not 100% true.
No, they did ask.
They did
They
ask.
asked you, and
Not
where-
us.
No,
They
not
didn't
us.
ask us, they asked the town. It didn't get to us.
didn't get
Whether
to us.
things fell through the cracks or not,
Yep.
and ultimately, that'll be
Okay,
determined.
But it shouldn't have.
But they didn't just sneak in the middle of the night and say, you know, we're gonna put poles in the
No.
ground.
They had to
They
do a
honestly
project.
did not realize they needed to come back to this board. And this is the problem, and this is a discussion I had last year at town meeting, where projects are permitted, and then the paper is sold. And then the new company comes in and thinks everything is in place and does what they do. There's an issue on Center Street the same way, where it was permitted by a reputable company, another company came in,
That's what they do.
and the poor guy's losing his mind right now.
I know, Mr. Silver, right? So, okay, but the thing is, you're telling me that people with lawyers, engineers, experts, don't know that they're putting CCA poles in wetlands? I mean, cranberry growers have ponds and streams
Yeah.
and water, they flood bogs in. You're telling me they didn't know they were buying peaty bogs?
I know.
That are get sanded
saying
every
that,
year?
same thing.
Give me a break. We're not stupid
Okay,
people.
I think it's time to, let's,
I'm sorry, but you know,
Give us a month.
Yep. I mean, we're aware of what Mr. Jermaine said
Right.
before,
Same.
you know, about,
the remediation factor, when you know what hits the fan,
Yeah.
years to come, is gonna be a problem for this town. So just like it is now, because of people's waters.
well, hopefully it won't be a problem. Hopefully
hoping
that
not.
somehow,
I'm hoping it's
Can we
not
skip
going to be, and
Floyd
I'm
Lake
trying to
discussion?
believe in everybody on this panel right now, okay? And I appreciate your time being up here, because I know you're getting paid
I'm
big
trying.
bucks.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I honestly do
Oh, Christ,
appreciate
Jesus.
your efforts and
I
time
won't even
on
sleep
this.
This poor guy's gotta get up at 4 o'clock. I get up at 4. I've been up since
I do
4 this
too.
morning,
So
too.
have I. So have I.
When do you get up at
I have
4?
another fucking job.
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I just have one more clarification.
Yes.
We have heavy equipment on the site that we need to get off of there because it's not going to be used. So in terms of there's no work that's taking place, it'd be just like taking them out, we need to take that equipment off. So I don't want the residents to get
Tremont
upset
Street
when they
or
see, and we'll send,
Both sites?
Both sites?
so we'll send an email to Brooke, let her know what the timing is for it, but I don't want the neighbors to be upset if they see things leaving.
All
Because
right,
we need to do that.
That
Okay.
makes perfect
All right.
sense.
We'll send that off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
For
you.
those that are left in the audience, if you see equipment coming and going, you'll know it's because they gotta move some stuff out. They gotta mobilize stuff. And you can't blame them for that, because it costs money to have it sit there.
Yep, doing nothing.
I don't fault that.
Thank you, Steve. And Peter.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like us to table the rest of the agenda for tonight.
Yeah.
Including the minutes.
It's only
Given-
20 to 11.
Yeah,
Oh,
good.
come on, let's get the hell out of here.
Given that Jim had, had enough and left, can we just, I make a motion, we table the rest of the agenda.
All right, I'll
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we table the rest of the agenda for tonight and move it to the November 3rd meeting.
Okay, so we
All
need a
those in-
motion to adjourn?
All those in
After we get a
favor?
vote on the table.
All those in favor?
Oh, aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Now, motion to adjourn.
4-0 absent.
Motion to adjourn, second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn.
Aye.
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 Aye, aye, aye.
We're
Shut
done.
the camera off
We're out.
now.